Welcome to Just a Minute. Hello, my name is Nicholas Parsons, and as the Minute Waltz fades away once more, it's my pleasure to welcome the four intrepid and experienced players of the game who are taking part this week. We welcome back two of our most senior players of the game, that is Clement Freud and Peter Jones, and we welcome two other regular players of a different generation, that is Paul Merton and Kit Hesketh-Harvey. Would you please welcome all four of them? Beside me sits Elaine Wigley, who's going to keep the score and blow a whistle when 60 seconds are up. And as usual, I'm going to ask our four players to speak on the subject that I give them, and they will try and do that without hesitation, repetition, or deviating from the subject. This particular recording is coming from the new Radio Theatre in the centre of Broadcasting House. And Peter Jones, will you begin the show this week? Big Bang Theory. 60 seconds, as usual, starting now.
Well, it's the way that several scientists describe the creation of the universe. The Big Bang Theory, they called it. And it was also given to the change...
Kit Hesketh-Harvey challenge.
It was an I'm afraid.
Yes, which is hesitation. So, Kit, you have a correct challenge. You get a point for that. You take over the subject, the Big Bang Theory. You have 47 seconds, starting now.
As one walks through Trafalgar Square in the heart of this great metropolis, coachloads of Japanese tourists descend and say, "Can you tell me any theory how we find Big Bang?" And you point to the Houses of Parliament. Say, there it is, in all its radiant beauty, erected by Nicholas Pugaz, I think he was called, or Pugin, I'm not quite sure how...
Clement Freud challenge.
Repetition.
Of Q.
Pugin and Pugin.
A repetition of Pew, anyway. So, Clement, you have a correct challenge. You take over the subject of the Big Bang Theory. 26 seconds are available, starting now.
If you inflate a large brown paper bag and bang your fist against it, compare the noise it makes to a hydrogen bomb and a grenade thrown into a lavatory basin. You will very soon come to a Big Bang Theory and decide which one made the most noise. It is not a particularly sensible thing to do, nor is this, I believe, a very brilliant...
He just kept going till the whistle went, gained that extra point for doing so. Kit Hesketh-Harvey, would you take the subject of Dracula and tell us something about that in just a minute, starting now?
He was purportedly the ancestor of our own sweet and gracious Princess Michael of Kent, a very unfair accusation to level at her. He was biographized by Bram Stoker.
Paul Merton challenge.
Biographized, yes.
Good word.
Well, it was a good word on the spur of the moment to keep it going, but it's, we'd usually say if you're deviating from English as we understand it, or as it is written or spoken, we give that as a deviation, and Paul, you are correct. 46 seconds. Dracula, starting now.
In the first Dracula film starring Bela Lugosi, there is an exchange of dialogue which I've always treasured because I think it's very funny, but in the film it's meant to be horrific. And they're staying at a country house, and Van Helsing comes up to Dracula and says, "There has been some informal talk amongst the house guests. We notice you cast no reflection in the looking glass." To which Dracula replies, "I don't feel very well."
Clement Freud challenged.
Repetition of film.
No, you said feel very well.
No, right at the beginning.
Yes, you
I
are
wanted
right.
to hear
Yes,
the story.
you mentioned the film twice. A very clever challenge and a very sporting one. You let him go, so we got the story out, and new challenge for repetition of film. Correct, Clement. 16 seconds. Dracula, starting now.
I do tend...
Peter Jones challenge.
2/3 of a second pause.
No, he got going before, actually, only half a second. I was looking at my...
Only half?
No, Peter, we can't challenge as rapidly as that. Dracula, still with you. 15 and a half seconds, Clement, starting now.
I do...
Peter...
Another half second, that takes a second.
Peter, you're so keen to get in on Dracula. We're all going to give it
want
to you.
to get to be part of the whole thing, you know.
13 seconds.
Look ridiculous just sitting here and never speaking.
Peter, I agree with your challenge. And you have Dracula with 13 seconds to go, and it's starting now.
I always wanted to play Dracula when I was in rep, because the idea of wearing these fangs and sinking them into the neck of some attractive young lady always appealed to me, because I always played comedy parts.
Clement Freud, your turn to begin. The subject, spying. Will you tell us something about that in just a minute, starting now?
I wasn't really going to talk about this, but some 25 years...
Paul Merton challenge.
Deviation. He said he wasn't going to talk about it. Now he started talking about it.
I think the audience applause endorses the shrewdness of your challenge. Shall we give it to you, Paul? 55 seconds. On spying, starting now.
Well, I think the subject should be given back to Clement.
Clement Freud, you challenge.
Hesitation.
Yes. You two have your private game going just to get points between each other. 52 seconds on spying with you, Clement, starting now.
This was not a subject I had been going to raise, but having been given spying, I thought it was possibly time to relate an incident when a man came up to me and said, "We would very much like you to join M15. As a consequence, I went to...
Oh, my challenge.
Hesitation.
The abs collapse, actually. 31 seconds. Spying is back with you, Paul, starting now.
A couple of years ago, I was asked by MFI to spy for them. And they were particularly keen to find out more about a certain Swiss furniture maker that was importing put-together wardrobes at a price which they couldn't match, quite frankly, and they wanted to know how it was done. So I had to disguise myself as a Dutch sea captain with one leg, and the other one was wooden, which was made out of one of those units you put together, and I had a drawer that came out the side of it where you can keep your socks and underpants, but
Oh, you should have done more spying. It's hysterical. Paul Merton was then speaking as the whistle went, gained that extra point for doing so, and at the end of that round, he's equal in the lead with Clement Freud. Then comes Peter Jones, and then Kit Hesketh-Harvey, and Paul Merton, it's your turn to begin. The subject is fortune-telling. Will you tell us something about that in this game, starting now?
crystal balls, tea leaves, tarot cards, the lines on your hand, these are all perfectly acceptable methods for people who claim to be fortune tellers. They will tell you about your future, which I suppose is quite good. There's no point in them telling you about your past because you were there when it happened. They will say you will meet a tall, dark stranger, or I see a long journey across the sea. Of course, it's all rubbish. We have Mystic Meg on the television at the moment, who pops up just before the National Lottery and she says, I see the colour blue in a winner's life. You know, everybody's got a bit of that colour in their life, I suppose, haven't they? I mean, you could say, well, that's the tablecloth or the wallpaper or the teapot that Auntie Nellie gave to us just before she died in that tragic hang-gliding accident off the Empire State Building. I have never had my fortune told because if it was true, I wouldn't like to know.
Kit Hesketh-Harvey.
Two truths, haven't we?
Yes,
with
we have
lots
two
of
truths,
truths,
yes.
actually, bless it.
And Kit, you've cleverly got in with 5 seconds to go on fortune-telling. What do you mean, oh, he was rather clever of it. This is the most prejudiced audience we've had here. Fortune-telling with you, Kit, starting now.
I once had a Chinese fortune cookie which told me you will burn your hand on liquid biscuit as you put this bit of...
So Kit Hesketh-Harvey was then speaking as the whistle went, gained that extra point for doing so, and he has moved forward into 3rd place, but he's only 1 point behind Clement Freud and Paul Merton, and 1 point ahead of Peter Jones. Peter Jones, it's your turn to begin. The subject, growing old. Can you tell us something about that? And reassure us, starting now.
How nice that they've singled me out to talk about this particular subject. One of the disadvantages is that one's old friends are no longer with us. Many of them have passed on, dropped off the twig or whatever you call it. On the other hand, there are people who weren't very nice to one in one's youth who also have gone on to a better place. Now, I'm very grateful to the BBC because they don't recognise age as such on the radio, because here we are in just a minute and there seems no limit to the...
Hesitation.
There was a hesitation, yes, when you thought about the limit, and 27 seconds. Growing old, Paul, starting now.
Of course, it's something we do every day in the way that spring comes before summer and autumn is the bit before winter.
Clement Freud challenged.
Repetition.
Yes, it wasn't one of your most inspired goes, I must say.
I tried to avoid not saying the same thing twice.
I know.
I picked another word and said that twice instead.
17 seconds, Clement, on growing old, starting now.
I went to Maurice Chevalier's 80th birthday party in Grasse in Provence, and he made a speech on the subject of growing old, and he said, people ask me how it is to be the age I am, and I say, think of the alternative.
Clement Freud kept going to the whistle end, gained that extra point for doing so, and is now in the lead at the end of the round. Kit Hesketh-Harvey, it is your turn to begin. The subject is Quangos. Will you tell us something about those strange and more modern phenomena starting now?
It's a marvellous word for Scrabble, of course. If you can get the beginning of it onto the triple word score, you'd be up and away. It sounds also like a name of a fruit drink that's in a fizzy bottle, a mixture of quince and mango. But principally, it's a little furry animal that was introduced by the Tory party in about 1976 and has proliferated somewhere between a coypoo and a jackal, I think. They have managed to ring them. They find they're particularly apparent in the counties where the wives of tweedy Conservative MPs who have nothing better to do flit from Quango to Quango, making heaps and heaps of money. And
Clement Freud challenge.
And heaps. Oh, dear.
Which is your challenge?
The fizzy bottle I didn't like.
So what is it that...
Deviation. You can't have a fizzy bottle.
Very clever, yes. And 26 seconds are available for you on Quangos, Clement, starting now.
There was a time before I grew old when I knew exactly what Quango stood for.
You just seemed to come to a halt.
He did come to a halt.
All I wanted to say.
And you got in first, because that's hesitation, and there are 15 seconds left for you to tell us something about Quangos starting now.
Well, it's little groups of people who are not elected by the public who decide on various important things to do with our lives. They interfere, they make...
Paul Merton challenge.
Repetition of they.
I know, it's a tough one, though, isn't it? But it's correct. 4 seconds for you on Quangos, Paul, starting now.
Quick, undress, angel, never go outside sunbathing.
Paul Merton, speaking as the whistle went, to gain that extra point. He's now equal in the lead with Clement Freud, and equal in second place are Kit Hesketh-Harvey and Peter Jones. Clement Freud, it's your turn to begin. The subject, Mussels. Will you tell us something about that subject in this game, starting now?
Mussels, I'm sure most of the audience know, is the name by which Nicholas Parsons is known in the trade. It is also actually a bivalve mollusk, which you eat, especially when there is no R in the month, because mussels don't really get too good when the water is too warm. You eat them primarily as a first course, or maybe if you have huge patience or are
Peter Jones, you're challenged.
Repetition of eat.
Yes, that's right, Peter. Well, listen. Repetition of eat.
Yes.
You eat them and...
What on earth else would you do with them? Take them to
That's
a
a perfectly
massage
valid
parlour.
comment, but in just a minute you can't repeat a word, and you repeated eat, I'm afraid, Clement. Peter got in with 32 seconds on Mussels, starting now.
Well, you can kind of stuff them with different items, I suppose, if you really are keen on it. But I would hesitate to...
Well, someone pressed the buzzer, but no light has come on. So, Paul's got in now.
Well, it was hesitation.
Paul, 22 seconds, Mussels starting now.
I've never had very strong muscles particularly. I used to be quite good at football, and so the muscles in my legs were quite well developed, but I've never had the muscles in the upper body. I'm no good at lifting things. I think you're always willing to pay somebody enormous amounts of money to do that kind of heavy task. I get so frustrated if somebody says to me when I'm walking down the street, give us a hand with this coffin and get it in the back of the car, because it's not my job.
Paul Merton once again was speaking as the whistle went, gained that extra point. Paul, it's also your turn to begin, and the subject is lodgers. Will you tell us something about that subject in just a minute, starting now?
There's this 88-year-old man who goes to the doctor and he says, I'm thinking of getting married and my bride-to-be is only 21. What do you think I should do? And the man that he went to see said, well, my advice is get a lodger in. So 6 months later, the old man's walking down the street and he sees the medical practitioner coming towards him and he says, oh, how's the wife? He says, she's pregnant. He says, how's the lodger? She's pregnant as well. Now, that kind of sums up what a lot of people think about lodgers. They seem to have a rather shifty reputation. It's a rather strange position to be.
Oh, Kit.
There were two rathers, I'm afraid.
There were two pregnants, too, but no. Kit, 26 seconds on lodgers, starting now.
There is the famous story of a very considerable comedian whose initials may or may not be NP, who was so generous that he went down to the docks every single night and brought back to his lodgings on tour Polish seamen with whom he would discourse late, oh gosh, I'm so sorry. Saved by the Bell.
Yes, Clement, you challenged, right, late.
Yes.
And 11 seconds on lodgers, starting now.
What part of Poland do you come from, he used to ask these navigating Eastern European gentlemen as they remove their upper and outer garments for the greater facility of an actor whose name may well have held the initials.
Now, Clement is back in the lead with Paul Merton, and Peter Jones and Kit Hesketh-Harvey are still equal in second place. And Peter, your turn to begin. The subject, Fleece. Will you tell us something about that subject in this game, starting now?
I remember being in a theatrical company for a long time in a small town where the inn was called the Fleece, and we used to go there for lunch, and it was awfully expensive. So I felt the place was really very aptly named. The only redeeming feature was a waitress called Martita, and she was extremely attractive. And if I'd had my way with her, I mean, if I'd been able to...
Peter, Kit Hesketh-Harvey.
So I was saving him from getting more flustered than he already was.
I'm not flustered.
You're not
wasn't
flustered?
at the time.
Oh, no, you weren't.
Kit Hesketh-Harvey, you had a correct challenge, 33 seconds. Fleece, starting now.
One of the greatest legends, of course, is that of Jason and the Golden Fleece. And you will remember when he was starring in Joseph and his amazing Technicolor Dreamboat, he was accused of...
Clement Freud challenge.
Two amazings.
Fleece is with you, Clement, and there are 23 seconds left, starting now.
Hey there, mister, you'd better mind your sister, 'cause the Fleece Inn was one of my favourite songs of the early post-war American musicals. I'm not sure what sort of fleece was in at the time, but it could well have been the Golden Fleece, which was the ship which took the children of the King of Thebes to wherever...
Clement Freud is back in the lead again. Kit Hesketh-Harvey, your turn to begin. The subject, vanity. Vanity. Will you tell us something about that in just a minute, starting now?
It's up there with the other 7 deadly sins, isn't it? Sloth and lust and avarice and gluttony and all those things. I'm particularly vain about my bottom. I'm rather proud of it. I slap it against the shower wall 36 times every morning to keep it pert and trim. It's something I learned from Richard Gere.
Paul Merton. Why did...
This isn't vanity, it's sadomasochism.
It might be sadomasochism to you, but...
But to you, it's a way of life.
You've got to say I do feed him wonderful cues, don't I? There we are. But the point is that, to my mind, Kit established that, however outrageous his behaviour, it was his way of trying to keep him trim and being vain. 43 seconds on Vanity, starting now.
I'm delighted to have been afforded this opportunity to discourse at further length about my posterior, which was so famous that as a penniless undergraduate, I used, in fact, a model for life classes, and this particular portion of my anatomy is now hanging in the Tate Gallery.
Peter Jones challenge.
Repetition of anatomy.
You had anatomy before,
I'm
yes.
sorry.
No, don't apologise. It's just that someone gets in, it's Peter Jones, and he has 30 seconds. You tell us something about Vanity, Peter, starting now.
It sounds rather a long time to talk about vanity. I wasn't listening terribly attentively to this business in the shower, but one does try, naturally, to look one's best as one...
Hesketh-Harvey, you've got it back.
He was trying, bless him.
He was trying, yes. You've got the subject back. 15 seconds on Vanity, starting now.
The book of Ecclesiastes, of course, in the Old Testament, says vanity of...
Clement Freud challenge.
It's his third, of course.
You did say, of course, before.
I'm getting terribly... I must get rid of this, of course, mustn't I?
I know.
I'm so sorry.
Peter Jones used to do it a lot, but now after...
No, Peter Jones always began with well.
Oh, that's right. Kenneth Williams. Kenneth used to say it. Was it that right?
Kenneth said, of course.
Yes, of course.
When we get back from memory lane, we get on with it.
11 seconds are left for you, Clement, on Vanity, starting now.
There's a very good American magazine called Vanity, which has features on food.
Kate Hesketh-Harvey.
Deviation, it's Vanity Fair.
It's Vanity Fair, I think.
No, that's a different magazine.
We have one American in the audience. Is that true or not? So do we. Right. Thank you very much. We brought you along specially to... Kit, I agree with the challenge. Vanity, 5 seconds are left, starting now.
Which was purportedly by King Solomon himself, although they discovered later it wasn't. Vanity of vanities.
A lot of points in that round, including one for speaking as the whistle went. He's moved rapidly forward. He's just behind Paul Merton. Clement Freud is just in the lead, and Peter Jones is just in there as well. And Clement Freud, your personality is now hopefully going to shine on myths for 60 seconds, starting now.
It is a myth that you can use just a minute to tell a joke, because it is simply impossible unless you have awfully nice people who are not going to challenge you. Mr., Mrs. and myth is the sort of awful 20th century definition of someone who can't make up their mind whether or not they are married. I think I'll stop there.
Kit, you got in, yes.
Sorry,
34 seconds on
hesitation.
myths with you, Kit, starting now.
One of the more bizarre myths is that where Zeus disguised himself as a swan and went down to a girl called Leda, and I can only say, Leda, removed the feathered glory...
Clement Freud challenge.
2 ladies.
Ladies. I mean, I know it was a different words you were using, but
Yes.
it's radio, so it is as it sounds. And it is
That's very
repetition.
complex. No, that's fine. Leda Hosen then is out as well, isn't it? Which is a shame.
25 seconds. Back with you, Clement. I think he saved you from something being... And you've challenged again, Kit. Hesitation. Well done. You've got the
Hesitation.
subject
Was it
back. 25 seconds on myth starting now.
Another one, of course, is in Wagner's Ring, where Siegmund and Leek stop it. Siegmund and Sieglinde.
Paul Merton challenge.
Repetition of Zygmunt?
Zygmunt, yes, he said stop it and he started again. Yeah. 16 seconds for you, Paul, on myth starting now.
Nicholas Parsons is an extremely well-loved entertainer that the British public have taken to their hearts over the last 65 years. This, of course, is a myth. Because he's more...
I hope you are applauding the whistle and not what he said. There we are. Paul Merton wasn't speaking as the whistle went. He gained an extra point. He's in second place, just behind Clement Freud. Kit Hesketh-Harvey is right on his heels. Peter Jones is not far behind them. We're moving into the last round, and the subject is big ears. And Paul Merton, it's your turn to begin.
Elephants have big ears so they can hear ants running towards them. In the wild, the elephant and the ant are natural enemies, and it's not rare to see them locked in mortal combat. The same can be said of the bee and the antelope. These two at first completely disparate creatures.
Hesitation.
Hesitation, yes. So Big Ears is with you, and you have 40 seconds on Big Ears starting now.
A famous pachyderm who had no truck with ants was, of course, Dumbo, to whom Big Ears were a marvellous asset. We wept, didn't we? We laughed, we sobbed when we saw him leap
and
from...
Peter Jones, you challenged.
Repetition of we.
That's right, yes. So, Peter, you're in on Big Ears with 29 seconds left starting now.
Yes, I think the Prince of Wales has got rather large ears. And while I'm on the subject, his eyes seem to be too close together.
Peter, you challenged.
Did I?
You challenged yourself.
Oh, yeah.
Hesitation.
What?
Peter, you hesitated. You challenged yourself. I think that was brilliant.
So I get another point.
So it's a correct challenge. You have another point, yes.
Oh, that's very good.
Now you know why I'm in charge and you're not, you see. Because I can give him a point, you can't. So, Peter, you very cleverly listened to yourself there and you challenged yourself. You got in, another point to you, and you have 12 seconds on Big Ears starting now.
Well, as I was saying earlier...
Paul Merton challenge.
I'd like to make an incorrect challenge.
Well, what is your incorrect challenge?
Too much red.
Peter, an incorrect challenge. You have another point.
Ah.
And you have 11 seconds on Big Ear starting now.
Well, as I was saying earlier...
Clement Freud challenge.
I think I made a mistake.
Yes. 9 seconds on Big Ears with you, Peter, starting now.
You see, you've been on this show for such a long time, and the BBC never...
Hesketh-Harvey
No,
challenge.
he's absolutely right. He has been on the show for hours and hours. I'm sorry, I got it wrong. Got it wrong.
So your challenge is what?
I'm incorrect. I'm sorry.
Victor, you're doing well. 5 seconds are left on Big Ears, starting now.
Like one of those leaves.
Paul Merton, you challenged twice.
Yep. Repetition of office furniture.
You're still stuck in the MFI when you were spying.
I
We've
didn't
moved
say
on.
office furniture. I said cat food.
Well, you've got 4 seconds to continue on Big Ears after another incorrect challenge, starting now.
And I'm very pleased that you're still with us. Because if you were not, I should probably have been...
You gained more points in that round than anybody's ever gained in one round. And it's my duty now to give the final score, which is a very interesting result because Paul Merton and Kit Hesketh-Harvey were equal in second place, but they were only 1 point behind joint winners because Peter came from nowhere to finish up alongside Clement Freud as our joint winners. So it only remains for me to say, on behalf of our 4 outstanding players of the game, which is Peter Jones, Paul Merton, Clement Freud and Kit Hesketh-Harvey, also want to thank Elaine Wigley for blowing her whistle so well and keeping the score for me, and also Ian Messiter for creating the game and thinking up the subjects, and for Anne Jobson for producing and directing the show. From all of them, and from me, Nicholas Parsons, it's goodbye, and we hope you will tune in again the next time we take to the air to play Just a Minute. Until then, from all of us, goodbye!
Welcome to Just a Minute.
Hello, my name is Nicholas Parsons, and as the minute waltz fades away, once more it is my pleasure to welcome the 4 talented players who are this week going to play Just a Minute. We welcome back 2 of our real old standing players of the game, that is Derek Nimmo and Peter Jones, Tony Hawks, who's played it many times, and Fred MacAuley, who's only played it once before. A few weeks ago, we recorded a show in the Civic Theatre in Ayr, and it was so popular and the audience was so marvellous, they've invited us back. Beside me sits Liz Trott, who's going to blow a whistle when the 60 seconds are up. She'll also keep the score. And I'm going to ask our 4 players of the game if they can speak on the subject that I give them. And they will try and do that without hesitation, repetition, or deviation. And we're going to begin the show this week with our Scottish player, Fred MacAuley. And Fred, a lovely Scottish subject, or you can take it any way you wish, of course, Burns. Will you tell us something about that subject, starting now?
Well, 1996 is the bicentenary of Burns' death, and 200 years ago he was lucky because you didn't have any problems with hesitation, repetition, or deviation, which is just as well, because gone would have been the poems like, my love is like a red something other coloured rose.
Derek, you charge.
Well, a very mean hesitation, actually.
I think it was mean, and as Fred's only played the game once before.
I'll withdraw.
Fred, we're going to be lenient with you. You keep the subject. I get a point for being interrupted, by the way. 45 seconds are left on Burns, starting now.
Another... Oh.
That's often what happens. Peter, you challenge this time.
It was a hesitation.
A strong hesitation there. So, Peter, so you have 43 seconds. You get a point for a correct challenge. You take over the subject of Burns, starting now.
Well, I think immediately of George Burns, that wonderful comedian who used to partner his wife, Gracie Allen. And since she died, he's established himself as a solo artist. And he's in his 90s now, still appearing fairly regularly on television. And the thing I admire most about him is that he's signed a contract to appear at the London Palladium on his 100th birthday. And I do hope that I shall be there to see him, because it won the most remarkable.
Fred, that challenge.
Yeah, I'm coming in with a mean hesitation as well.
No, I don't think it was so mean. I think it was definite hesitation. So you have Burns back with you with 14 seconds to go, starting now.
Well, I prefer Rabbie Burns, and he would have said, my love is like a red and another coloured rose.
No, Tony, you challenge. You said
repetition of red again, I'm afraid.
You can't repeat the words you've already used when you were
Not
previously
even the first
talking.
time?
No, no, no.
Oh, my apologies.
You can repeat them in
I was just going to...
You can repeat them in another round, but not in this round. You didn't know that, did you, Fred?
No, I didn't know
And
that.
the audience insists that you have it back. Right, so you will interrupt, you get another point. 8 seconds on Burns, Fred, with you starting now.
Fair for your honest sonsy face. Hey, chieftain o'er the puddin' raise. A bend them all, you had your place. That was one of his famous poems, and I know it.
Oh, by the way, whoever is speaking when the whistle goes gains an extra point, and it was Fred MacAuley, our second-time player of the game. Tony Hawks, it's your turn to begin. The subject, Mensa. Will you tell us something about that in this game, starting now?
I used to think that Mensa was an acronym for Mentally Enhanced Nerds Sit Around. I am not a member of Mensa. I was sent the application form but was unable to reassemble it in the shape of a rhomboid in the allotted 40 seconds. Gary Bushell, however, the TV critic of The Sun, is in this magnificent society, which goes to show that intelligence and good writing don't necessarily go together. He will not give me a good review next time I appear on the television.
Fred MacAuley challenged.
Yeah, it was a pretty weak challenge. But I think we had television twice.
Yes, the television critic, he said, and television again.
Why was that a weak challenge? I would have thought that was a bloody good one.
No, the bell didn't go off very strongly.
I see what you mean.
27 seconds, Fred. Mensa, starting now.
I know that Mensa isn't an acronym at all. It comes from the Latin mensa, which means likely to be found in kitchens, extremely boring, and unlikely to have much of a life beyond
Peter Jones' challenge.
Hesitation.
Yes. Hesitation. Yeah. 14 seconds are left. Mensa is with you. Another point as well, of course, starting now.
Yes, I remember being told to learn this when I was at school, and the second person singular is table.
Derek Nimmo challenged.
Well, there was a hesitation.
There was a hesitation, Derek.
Well, I wanted to do it slowly so that people would be able to take it in, since it is Latin and it's not difficult.
I thought you were going to actually decline it for us.
Well, I would have done, but
unfortunately...
I won't do it now. Well, table, you see, means table, and I thought, well, if I ever have occasion to address a piece of furniture, I shall know how to do it. I can't believe that the Romans ever really needed to do that. They didn't go around talking to pieces of wood, did they? They'd never have got anywhere.
7 seconds for you, Derek, on Mensa, starting now.
I think you'd have to be a member of Mensa to be able to understand Robert Burns, Greek chieftain of the pudding race. An extraordinary thing to say.
Fred, challenge
desserts.
You see, I got into trouble for saying red twice, and he's just said what I said.
I know, but he didn't say it in the other round.
All right, it's okay. I'm picking up the rules as we go along.
So, Derek interrupted Mensa. 1 second, starting now.
Michael Winner is a member...
Peter, it's your turn to begin. The subject is Tiddlywinks. Will you tell us something about that intriguing game starting now?
Well, I don't think it is intriguing, rather boring, in fact. But it is dangerous. Anybody under 5 shouldn't be allowed to do it, because these Tiddlywinks look very like Smarties, and they might easily put them in their mouths and choke to death, perhaps. And anyone over 5, of course, ought not to play it, because they must be out of their minds.
Tony Hawk's challenged.
I'm sorry, but it was a repetition of 5 there.
Yes, there was 5. Anyone over 5 and under 5. Sorry.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
Tony, you've got in with 42 seconds on the subject of Tiddlywinks, starting now.
If you were winking at someone surreptitiously, you might be said to be indulging in tiddlywinks. However, I would be the last person to say this because it's not remotely funny. Tiddlywinks is a fantastic game. Little bits of plastic flicking them about with your fingers. Oh, what a way to spend an evening. Many's the time I have all my chums over. We crack open a few beers. It's going to be our Tiddlywinks evening. We sit up. We get so excited. We put bets on. Yes, who's going to win the Tiddlywinks championship tonight? We say to each other as we excitedly bound towards the board where we keep the plastic bits.
Fred challenged.
A repetition of plastic.
Yes, there was too much plastic there, I'm afraid. So, Fred, you got in with 6 seconds on Tiddlywinks, starting now.
Anyone who ever plays Tiddlywinks is unlikely to find themselves also being a member of Mensa, because if you do that...
Fred, I think you're getting the idea of how to play this game now. You've increased your lead at the end of that round, and Derek Nimmo's turn to begin. Derek, bunkers. Will you tell us something about that subject in this game, starting now?
I suppose the biggest series of bunkers ever made, that is out of concrete and steel, was the Maginot Line, which was a fortification between France and Germany. The Huns, quite sensibly, didn't try to go through it. They went round the edges, and it worked frightfully well. Actually, the frogs hadn't thought of that, which is rather surprising. But other bunkers, of course, can be for coal. I have one of these bunkers in my little cottage in London, and I keep this...
Peter Jones challenge.
Hesitation.
Yes, I think so, Peter. You have another point, you have the subject, there are 32 seconds, and it is bunkers with you, starting now.
When one of my sons was very young...
yes, Derek?
There's a general sort of confusion.
Well, yes, he had a sharp hesitation for you, so I must be fair and give you a sharp hesitation back. So 30 seconds with you, Derek, on bunkers, starting now.
If you go to the Ayrshire coast, you will see some of the most magnificent and evil bunkers on the golf course there.
Peter Jones challenge.
What did he say? Evil bunkers?
Evil bunkers, yes.
Evil bunkers.
Are they evil?
Well, I said to a golfer they could be described as being evil.
I think evil, they really are difficult.
They're difficult.
Well, difficult, yes. But evil is a different thing. We're talking about good and evil. I mean, we can't really talk about these sandholes. It doesn't make sense, does it?
I don't think so. So
no,
I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt, because you had a very sharp challenge on you a moment ago.
Yes.
Benefit of the doubt. 23 seconds, Peter. Bunkers starting now.
This boy said, "What is a bunker, Daddy?" And I said, "It's something on a golf course, a hole." And he said, "Did Hitler play golf?" And I said, well, no, that's a different sort of bunker altogether.
Derek Nimmo challenge.
Went to one woo noise again.
No, he didn't go whoa, whoa, whoa then.
You're one to talk.
Yes. The last time he did, but not that time, Derek. 13 seconds still with you, Peter, on bunkers starting now.
And they create these all over the golf courses so that people can't just...
Tony Hawk's challenge.
I think repetition of golf.
You mentioned golf courses before. So, Tony Hawk's, you've cleverly got him in 9 seconds left.
That rule you made up in order to get him out of it, wasn't it? About not repeating it, something you said earlier in the round.
Can't repeat
Fred
words.
said he was picking it up as he was going along, and I thought, well, Nicholas is making it up as he goes along.
I don't know why you're clapping. He's talking rubbish. It's one of the rules of the game. You can't repeat certain words, and you have repeated the word golf.
Not after you've had an interruption, surely.
Yes, and you know that after 28 years, Peter, you know that in one round you cannot repeat the word however many times you are interrupted.
Really?
And that has always been the truth.
Well, I never knew that.
Right.
Amazing, isn't it?
Anyway, you're
I've
still...
always thought there was something wrong.
Tony Hawks. You've got 9 seconds to tell us something about bunkers starting now.
My cousin was in a coal bunker which caught fire, and he got burns on the underside of his chin, on the front and underneath, at exact right angles, and was admitted to hospital with 90-degree burns.
So Tony Hawks was then speaking as the whistle went, gained that extra point for doing so. He is in 4th place behind Derek Nimmo, then Peter Jones, but one ahead of Peter is our leader, still Fred MacAuley, who begins the next round. Fred, allergies. Can you tell us something about that in this round, starting now?
I've only ever suffered from one allergy. I've never been one to sneeze when a cat comes into the room or something like that. My allergy was an allergy to strawberry plants. As they grew, strawberry leaves...
Tony Hawks challenged.
Sorry, repetition of strawberry there.
Too many strawberries, I'm afraid, yes. 47 seconds are available for you on allergies, Tony, starting now.
I'm allergic to people who have allergies. Whenever they appear, I get a rash desire to tell them to pull themselves together and stop whinging and moaning about this and that. A cat is not that much of a problem, I say to them. But am I being unsympathetic? Allergies can be serious. I can also, and I'm going to be in a minute. But first, a humorous joke about allergies.
Fred MacAuley challenged.
There was all kinds of things going wrong there, wasn't there?
Well, give us one.
He deviated for a minute and then hesitated.
That's right, he deviated from that. He was telling jokes and not about allergies. So, listen, Fred. Deviation, 22 seconds. Back with you. Allergies starting now.
These plants that grow out of the ground and bear fruit.
Tony.
Repetition of plants.
Is a strawberry plant. I'm afraid you are right, Tony. 19 seconds. Allergies starting now.
In my poem, Elegy to Allergy, I cover this subject enormously well. Those of you that have purchased it, for it is at sale in W.H. Smith and other leading stockists, price £400, you have read it and know it already. No need for...
Derek Nimmo challenge.
You read my book and then you read it again.
Read. You've got him with 2 seconds to go on allergies, Derek, starting now.
My poor dear wife, to whom I've been married for 40 years, is allergic to me.
Derek Nimmo was speaking as the whistle went, move forward, and he's only 1 point behind our leader, who is still Fred MacAuley. Tony Hawks, your turn to begin. The subject, shades. Can you tell us something about that in just a minute, starting now?
My favourite hobby is wandering into a chemist or a large store and watching people as they purchase shades, because they buy them mainly to look cool. And what happens? They have little tags hanging over their noses when they try them on. I stand behind the counter and snigger at them as this goes on, and they are so humiliated they don't go ahead with the particular object they were about to buy. I wish that I had the opportunity to wear shades and look cool on this...
Fred challenge.
Yeah, another cool slipping in there.
Cool, yes. Too cool, right. Fred, 30 seconds. Shades
starting now.
A boy at our school was called Shades McGowan because he always wore dark glasses to make him look sinister rather than cool. He was an evil-looking character in the old-fashioned sense of the word, which meant that he...
Derek Nimmo challenge first.
Well, repetition of ha-ha.
No, just a repetition of I think. Right, Derek, 17 seconds. Shades, starting now.
I have a very gloomy garden, and it's very difficult to find plants that will actually grow in the shade. Hostas I recommend to any gardeners that happen to be here.
Tony Hawks.
Deviation, he's talking about shade and not shades.
No.
Yes. I think that's a good challenge of deviation. 10 seconds with you, Tony, on shades, starting now.
International celebrities wear them under the pretense that they won't be recognised, but what happens? You see them and think, there's that bloke trying to get noticed with those ridiculous...
Tony Hawks kept going till the whistle went, gained that extra point, and it is Peter Jones' turn to begin. The subject now, Peter, charm. Can you tell us something about charm? I think it's lacking in our society so much today. Starting now.
Well, you really took the words out of my mouth. But it is not in very good supply at the moment, particularly in show business. When you think of the glorious stars of the past like Jack Buchanan and Barbara Mullin and Sophie Stewart and Harry Gordon and all those people who are familiar to you, I'm sure, they were really charming. Now, you can't say that about Bruce Willis and various other people who are
Yes, Fred, challenge first.
Bruce Willis is charming. So I can say it.
You can say yes, but I wouldn't have that as a challenge if I were you. What about hesitation, Fred?
Okay.
Right. 30 seconds, Fred, starting now.
Not all of the McGowan family were evil. The younger brother of Shades was called Charm McGowan because he...
Tony.
I'm afraid repetition of McGowan.
Oh, it's a tough game. 32 seconds with you on charm. Tony Hawk starting now.
There are many beautiful girls here this evening, but of them all, you are the most radiant. Would be an example of charm. However, I don't have that ability. Instead of doing that, I will approach a female and say, there are some interesting cycle routes in the area, aren't there? Or isn't it amazing how long things stay hot in thermos flasks? I wish I had the charm to woo them in the way that Bruce Willis...
Tony Hawks kept going on charm till the whistle went and charmed the audience, got a big round of applause and a point, and he's now equal in the lead with Fred MacAuley. And Derek Nimmo, your turn to begin. The subject, growing sprouts.
I remember when I was about 8 years old. I was in the bath, and my mother was coming in to see me, and she suddenly noticed that growing out of my back there were little sprouts, and she said, "You little angel," because she thought I was going to turn into one. And from then on, I've always been called Gabriel. They never grew very large, of course, but they are quite definitely sprouts. And if any of you would like to come after the show today, I'm very happy to show the little feathered friends that I have there on my back. If you want to grow them in a horticultural sense.
Yes.
Back.
I thought it was quite sick-making, actually. But, Fred, you have another point. You have growing sprouts. You have 31 seconds, starting now.
Growing Sprouts McGowan was the third brother, and he got his nickname from his horticultural predilection.
Derek Nimmo challenge. Hesitation, yes. Too many McGowan. 23 seconds, Derek. Growing sprouts, starting
Well, you
now.
need a really good compost. That's the most important thing. I put a lot of manure into the ground, you dig your furrows, and you grow the seedlings elsewhere, bring them out.
Tony Hawk's challenged.
Repetition of grow.
Yes, I'm afraid so. Tony, 16 seconds, growing sprouts, starting now.
My grandfather has an allotment which he shares with the McGowan family. Shade and charm, and their sprouts are all...
Derek Nimmo challenge.
Why does your grandfather have an allotment in Perthshire?
Because he lives in Perthshire.
8 seconds for you, Tony. Incorrect challenge starting now.
I have been growing sprouts since I was 4 years old. I didn't do it in the bath like Derek did. I did it at the bottom.
Fred MacAuley, we're back with you to begin. The subject, busking. Talk on the subject if you can, starting now.
Busking is the generic term for anybody that wants to stand up in a street anywhere with any old instrument. It could be a tea chest or a guitar, and they think that this is entertainment. All they have to do is shout, and people think, oh, this is magnificent, I'll give them some money.
Derek Nimmo challenge.
2 things.
There were 2 things, yes. 47 seconds for you, Derek, on busking. Starting
I think the most wonderful buskers in the whole wide world are in Xochimilco in Mexico. There are the mariachis standing there, hundreds of them, waiting for her. You go on one boat, they go on another, and they play to you quite divinely. 3 trumpets, 7 violins. You toss them coins, pesos, which they're frightfully grateful for. Mind you, you can go to
Tony
London
Hawk's
Underground.
challenge.
Why are you telling them to pes us?
All right, Tony, have a bonus for that one. But Derek was interrupted. He keeps the subject. Busking starting now.
I went onto the Piccadilly line, and as I descended the escalator, I saw a very amiable fellow from the West Indies playing a saxophone and asking me, in between mouthfuls of air, if I would contribute to his little hat, which I did. I was very happy to do that. And I was in Grafton Street in Ireland, and a woman said to me, she said, would you like to give some money if you so desire? Now, I thought that was very charming for a busker, don't you?
So Derek Nimmo kept going to the whistle when gained that extra point, and he's now equal with Fred MacAuley in second place behind our leader, Tony Hawks, who begins the next round. Tony, trunks. Can you tell us something about that in just a minute, starting now?
Nellie the elephant packed her trunk and said goodbye to the circus. Off she went with a trumpety trump, and she repeated the next word 3 more times. In my opinion, it's foolish for these jungle creatures to pack their trunks because they're attached to their body. I don't have a trunk. If I had a dangly thing at the front of my body, then I would certainly not whack it.
Derek Nimmo challenge.
Deviation, I don't want to know about the dangly thing in front of his body.
Everyone else does.
But I think he was talking about trunks, so you don't want to hear about it. I quite agree, but he wasn't actually deviating in just a minute. So, Tony, you keep the subject. Tell us more about trunks. 38 seconds, starting now.
Some men wear swimming trunks that are so small they start to disappear up behind them. They are almost mooning, one could say, unintentionally. They usually hang around on Greek beaches, flexing their muscles. Their trunks, their symbol to the female beach goers that they are attractive. Hey, look at me.
Derek Nimmo challenge.
You're talking rubbish, isn't it?
I am talking rubbish.
What is it, just deviation?
Deviation, that's
yes, right. 17 seconds, trunks starting now.
Probably the most wonderful cabin trunks ever were actually constructed by
Fred
Louis.
challenged.
I thought there was a little hesitation
There
there.
was a little hesitation there,
absolutely
Fred,
right.
yes. Trunks. Tell us about Mr. What's the name?
Trunks McGowan.
Trunks McGowan. Tell us about him in 13 seconds if you can, starting now.
The first pair of trunks I had were knitted woolen ones, were weren't so much an item of clothing, more a form of punishment. And I wonder if in 20 years' time my children will be saying, oh, do you remember these lycra trunks, how ridiculous they were? They didn't fit.
So Fred MacAuley, speaking as the whistleman, got an extra point. He's still in second place behind Tony Hawks. Peter Jones, your turn to begin. The subject, queues. Could you tell us something about that in just a minute, starting now?
Well, apart from lines of people waiting to get on a bus or into a cinema or something, they're also the line which the actor, prior to you speaking, has to say so that you know when to deliver your own line. And, of course, if you forget his or even your own, it does hold up the proceedings terribly. And it's pretty boring if nobody can remember it. Of course, there are prompters, so it is business it is to give people... What's the matter? What are you waving at?
You carry on.
I thought you were going.
Fred, you challenged at last.
I thought I detected a slight hesitation.
Yes, right. There was a slight hesitation, yes, but Peter, we did enjoy it. But Fred, you have 20 seconds to tell us something about cues starting now.
Well, the kind of cues that I'm more familiar with, thanks to a misspent childhood, are snooker cues. And as the people of Scotland will know, we respect our players who use these implements to knock balls into the holes in the corner of the tables on which this game is played, and we admire them for winning £147,000 in 11 minutes and 30 seconds.
Well done, Fred. Kept going till the whistle went. And you're now back in the lead alongside Tony Hawks. And we're moving into the last round. Let me tell you as we do so, Derek Nimmo's in third place and then Peter Jones in fourth place. And Derek, it's your turn to begin. The subject, digits. Can you speak on that subject in this game starting now?
I was reminded when this program began, or rather just before it, by the wife of the editor of the Glasgow Herald, that I have rather curious digits. In other words, my toes are a little strange. I hadn't thought about them for years, but she said to me, she came to see me a long time ago in a musical hall Charlie Girl, and I displayed my digits for her delectation. And greatly she enjoyed it at the time. Now, I wonder about that, because I used to say nursery rhymes to them. There's the church, and there's the steeple, there's the preacher.
And Tony Hawk's challenge.
3 there's in
Two
very quick succession.
yes.
Well, that was the rhyme. I can't change it just for you.
Tony, you've got in with 30 seconds on digits starting now.
There is an old joke connected with digits. Can I use your dictaphone? No, use your finger like everybody else. Dave Allen, of course, has 9 digits. He lost one at some point, but this did not stop his career blossoming. He would hold up his hand, and it would get a great amusement from the audience as they saw one finger missing. Digits of my phone number will be handed out on pieces of paper after the...
Peter Jones' challenge.
There was a sort of hesitation.
There was a definite hesitation, and you've got in cleverly, Peter, with only 2 seconds to go on digits starting now.
Well, they can be fingers and thumbs and toes.
Fred MacAuley challenge.
There's probably about half a second, but it's the only chance I've got to mention one of the McGowan family. Who only had 8 fingers, and you'll never guess what he was called.
Right, we'll give him a bonus point for his digit fingers. Peter Jones a point for being interrupted, and he has half a second to tell us more about digits, Peter, starting now.
Very useful.
Alas, we have no more time to play just a minute. Let me give you the final score. Peter Jones, who has excelled in this game over many years and contributed so much, but he did this week finish in only 4th place. Little way behind Derek Nimmo, who has often triumphed in the past. But out ahead of both of them are the new player of the game, Tony Hawks, but alongside him, the man who's only played the game once before. And they are joint winners. Congratulations to Fred MacAuley and Tony Hawks. It only remains for me to thank our 4 marvellous players of the game, which is Derek Nimmo, Peter Jones, Tony Hawks and Fred MacAuley. And also we'd like to thank this lovely audience here at the Civic Theatre in Ayr, who've been so warm and encouraging us all to play the game with such panache. I thank Liz Trott for keeping the score, blowing her whistle when 60 seconds were up. We thank Ian Messiter for thinking of the game, keeping us in work. We thank Anne Jobson for producing it so well. And also from me, Nicholas Parsons. On behalf of all of them, goodbye. Hope you'll be with us next time we play Just a Minute.
Welcome to Just a Minute. Yes. Hello, my name is Nicholas Parsons, and as the minute waltz fades away, once more it is my pleasure to introduce the 4 talented performers who this week are going to play Just a Minute. We welcome back 2 of our senior players who've been with the show since it first began. That's Derek Nimmo and Clement Freud. We welcome another regular who's added such a boost to the continuing progress and popularity of the show. That is Paul Merton, and someone who's only played the game for the second time. That is Maria McErlane. Will you please welcome all 4 of them? Beside me sits Yolanta Zabuki, and on this show she will keep the score, blow a whistle when 60 seconds are up. And this particular edition of Just a Minute is coming from the fine city of Nottingham, and I'm going to ask our 4 players to speak, if they can, as usual, on the subject that I give them, and they will try and do that without hesitation, repetition, or deviating from the subject on the card. We're going to begin the show this week with Clement Freud, and Clement, the subject is Goose, an apt subject for Nottingham. Will you talk about it in 60 seconds, if you can, starting now?
In no cowards, peace.
Paul, that was the quickest challenge we've ever had at the beginning of Just a Minute. And yes...
Hesitation.
Hesitation? What happened? Unlike you, Clement, to drive so rapidly.
I wanted Paul to come in.
Right, 56 seconds are available for you, Paul. You have a correct challenge, so you get a point for that. You take over the subject. Goose, starting now.
I would like to leave a hesitation here so Clement can come in.
Clement Freud has come. If we go on playing like this, there'll be no show, but they'll all get a lot of points. Clement, you've got a hesitation. 53 seconds, Goose, starting now.
In a bar on the Piccolo Marina, life began for Mrs. Kingston Brewster. A man came up and goosed her. There are also Brent Grey, Laughing and Barnacle geese. And I would very much like to recommend Goose for Christmas if anyone is getting sick of turkey, chicken, roast beef or whatever other meats they might have for the celebration. The best way to do it is to get a goose that has been reared especially for the table, one that has run alongside race courses and trained horses or greyhounds, tends to get very
Merton
tough.
is challenged.
Repetition of horses.
No, it wasn't a repetition, no. Clement, an incorrect challenge, so you get a point for that, and you have 13 seconds on Goose, starting now.
Applesauce, gravy, red cabbage are the sort of things with which you would eat goose, apart from a knife and a fork.
Derek
In
Nimmo
Poland...
yes.
You don't need a knife and fork with goose, do you?
Well, most people eat with knife
Paul,
and
he's
fork.
getting so slowly, isn't it?
I know.
Goose.
Well, do you... Do you eat your goose with your fingers then? Is that what you're suggesting?
Of course I do.
Oh, right. So, but you can still eat with a knife and fork, so it was an incorrect challenge. And, Clement, if you can cheer yourself up a little and go for another 3 seconds on Goose, starting now.
I'd like to say very quickly, you can eat a goose in your fingers.
Derek, you challenged me.
Well, repetition.
Yes, he did repeat the word eat. Yes, well done, Derek. You've got 1 second left to tell us something about Goose.
Sidney Smith said that his idea of heaven was eating.
There we are. So Derek Nimmo was speaking as the whistle went, gained that extra point for doing so, and we start the second round with Paul Merton. Paul, the subject is balmy evenings. Will you tell us something about those? In 60 seconds, if you can, starting now.
I often go round to Nicholas Parsons' house of an evening, and those are indeed balmy evenings. He has a peculiar habit of taking all his clothes off, walking into his own living room with a packet of dry roasted peanuts and saying, "Anybody for nuts?" And you look at him and you think, I don't know, is he gone a little bit balmy here? But you let it pass. Then we come to the main meal of the evening.
I must say, I do find this an extraordinarily deviant situation. Nicholas Parsons wandering around without any clothes on, asking people to have his nuts. I don't think this is the sort of thing that's either true or should be allowed on what is, after all, a family chef.
How do you know what I get up to in the privacy of my own home?
If you
But actually, I've, in order to be accurate, you're quite right, Derek, I don't think I've done that. Not as far as I know, anyway. So we'll say that it was deviation.
Oh, you liar. Well, that's the last time I have a handful of dry roasted.
Well, we love your flights of fantasy, Paul, but Derek must have a correct challenge. 33 seconds are available. Another point to you, Derek. Balmy evenings starting now.
Only 2 nights ago, I was sitting in Kyrenia, in northern Cyprus, on a particularly balmy evening. I had a splendid meal, talam salata, baba ganoush, and so on. And then suddenly, holding a glass of ouzo in one hand and some cafe maître in the other, I saw a boat glide across that beautiful bay with a minaret.
Paul, challenge.
Who cares?
I think all the listeners are just a minute, because they're listening to see if he's going to hesitate, repeat something, or deviate.
Well, he's just swanking again about his holidays, isn't he?
I know. This is why he comes on the show, to show off and impress people, and he does it extremely well. Derek, another point to you, 12 seconds. Balmy evening starting now.
It is very nice at this time of the year, isn't it, when you suddenly get one last warm evening and you think that perhaps you will not see
Maria
the
challenged.
Repetition of evening from before.
Yes, because the subject is balmy evenings, it's in the plural, and he repeated the word evening.
Singular.
Maria, you have a correct challenge. You have balmy evenings, and there are 6 seconds left starting now.
My idea of a marvellous balmy evening would be to have a game of Twister, Nicholas Parsons nut.
Maria, you were speaking as the whistle went, gained an extra point for doing so, and at the end of that round, you are in second place, equal with Clement, Freud, and Derek. It is your turn to begin. The subject, salad days. Will you tell us something about it in just a minute, starting now?
Ah, my salad days when I was green in judgment, which was spent here in Nottinghamshire and Derbyshire. I used to go and live for quite long periods because
Paul Merton challenge.
Hesitation.
Yes, Paul, and there are 49 seconds for you to tell us something about salad days, starting now.
When I do the shopping for the week, I buy the vegetables on the Tuesday, but on Wednesday, that's the time I go and buy the salad.
Clement, Freud challenge.
2 buys.
2 buys, yes. Clement, there are 41 seconds left. Salad days starting now.
If you're going to have lots of salads on salad days, I do suggest that Caesar is one that you should not neglect. You use a whole beaten egg, some garlic, anchovies, Parmesan cheese, escarole, and Chinese leaf, ideally. And
Derek Nimmo challenge.
Elizabeth David.
It's
just sort of doing recipes, isn't it?
I know.
It's not...
But it doesn't
not talking
matter.
about salad days. He's giving recipes. It's a food show. It's got nothing to do with just a minute. He's just saying that... Doing some pepper and pudding. What's going on there?
Yes, Derek, I'm going to grant you that deviation because it's a deviation from salad days to a salad recipe. So I think that's a good challenge. You have 23 seconds starting now.
I was taken by my great-grandmother to the trip to Jerusalem in Nottingham, and I must say... I haven't
Clement
said
Freud
must say
challenge.
he's had Nottingham already.
You've had Nottingham. No, he had Nottinghamshire.
Yes, that's Nottingham.
Yes, I know. But he used the word Nottinghamshire and
Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire.
So I have to listen, and he didn't say Nottingham, he said Nottinghamshire. So I'm sorry, Clement.
Is having to listen a new resolution.
No, it's my constant, as you know.
You're very good, Nicholas. You ought to be made Governor of Parkhurst, I think.
11 seconds for you, Derek, to continue on salad days.
One went into the theatre with such high hopes. One wanted to play Drury Lane.
Paul Merton challenge you.
Repetition of 1.
1. You went in with such high hope. You did repeat the word 1. Yeah. Right, don't look at me like that. 8 seconds, salad days with you, Paul, starting now.
I was eating a Caesar's salad on the Greek island of Lesbos some 48 hours ago. And as I...
Maria's challenge.
Yeah, I just haven't spoken for a long time and people at home might think I fainted. That's all.
A round of applause for your good challenge, and a round of applause, not a round of applause, but another point also for the fact that he was deviating because he was giving a recipe and not talking about salad days. Well, if I'm fair to one, I've got to be fair to them all in the same premise.
At what point was I given a recipe?
You were talking
We're
about...
on Lesbos.
You were on Lesbos?
That's not given a recipe, is it?
Well, no, you were talking about a salad you were having in Lesbos and you were taking off Derek Nimmo, which was very witty and very funny, but it wasn't a
though. You
recipe.
don't get Delia Smith's cookery book and it says, go to Lesbos.
You did not convey to me that this was...
It's impossible to convey anything. Who's the Prime Minister?
Well, after what you said about me earlier on, I'm not surprised as well. But anyway, you did not establish, to my mind, that this was how you spent your salad days. It was something you did quite recently. And I think you're past your salad days, and therefore you should recall...
Well,
I've got to justify myself somehow with these fellas. And Maria, everybody thought she'd fallen asleep, so she was every right to come in. And she has 1 second on salad days, starting now.
Salad days, hooray!
Right. Well, at the end of that round, Maria McErlane was speaking as the whistle went, gained an extra point. She's now in second place behind Clement Freud and Derek Nimmo, who are equal in the lead, and Paul is just 1 point behind Maria. And Clement Freud, it's your turn to begin. The subject, dripping. Yes, someone such a gourmet as Clement should be given dripping, but maybe he'll give us a different dimension to that subject. 60 seconds, starting now.
Dripping is melted fat that drips from a joint and is collected in a drip tray. And if you put some bread into it, it is delicious. There is something called dirty dripping, which is dripping...
Derek Nimmo challenged.
Hesitation.
Yes, there was an there, Derek. Yes, dripping was with you in between two words that you spoke.
Oh, really?
Yes. 44 seconds, dripping starting now.
I used to stay with my aunt in Ilkeston, and the maid there, called Mary, used to have the most wonderful dripping, either pork or lamb and beef, and we used to covet this and go into the kitchen where we were very tiny and get the bread and dripping spread across and lots of black pepper and salt, and it was absolutely delicious. It seemed like foie gras to us at that time. I was only 9 years old, but gosh, you know, those happy memories remain. And if I see a candle guttering and the dripping falling, I go towards it now with a bowl and take it out to my little rabbit, which lives outside in a hutch, and I say, would you like some dripping, little rabbit? Always replies and says, oh, my goodness, such a joy, happiness.
Derek Nimmo's dripping kept going until the 60 seconds was up. He dripped away fantastically well, gained an extra point for doing so, and he's taken the lead at the end of that round. Yes, he has indeed. Paul Merton, your turn to begin. The subject, capers. Will you tell us something about those in this game, starting now?
When I was a young boy, I used to get up to all kinds of mischief. I remember once we whitewashed the next-door neighbours, and what we did was we climbed through their bedroom window while they were asleep, got a bucket of the aforementioned substance and covered them from head to foot. They woke up the next morning and thought that they had lost all kinds of reason, because there they were, covered in this particularly...
Maria, challenge.
Repetition of covered.
They were too well covered, I'm afraid.
I thought perhaps I was doing another recipe and didn't know.
No, it's all right. There's a certain bitterness that comes out on occasions. Maria, 35 seconds. Capers starting now.
I'm not too sure of the difference between capers and capons, although I realise I'm in dangerous territory of doing another recipe if I continue to pursue this particular argument. Capons, I believe, are small...
Clement Freud challenge.
Repetition of capons.
You could repeat capers, but not capons. Yeah. Clement, a correct challenge, and 23 seconds available for capers starting now.
I'd like to give you a recipe using skate, which you boil in milk, ideally, and then garnish with capers in black butter with lemon juice. Absolutely delicious. Sort of thing Derek Nimmo in his youth would get in his aunt's house in Ilkeston, which is not far from Nottingham, which always gets a cheer, because capers in this drink...
They all know how to play to the audience, don't they? Clement, you were speaking as the whistle went, gained an extra point for doing so, and at the end of that round, you are equal again in the lead with Derek Nimmo, and then it's Maria McErlane and Paul Merton in that order. And Maria, your turn to begin, and the subject is boots. Will you tell us something about boots in just a minute, starting now?
These boots are made for walking, and that's what they're going to do. One of these days, my boots are going to walk all over you. Well,
A Paul Merton challenge.
Deviation from the original lyric. One of these days,
Where?
these boots, not my boots. One of these days, these boots are
but I'd
going to
already
walk
said
over.
these, though.
She already said these, and after all, she can misquote a lyric if she wishes. I mean, to keep going. I mean, you don't have to be factual all the time.
The wrong recipe, can't you? Really?
It's been known to happen, I'm sure.
Tablespoonful of salt rather than a teaspoonful of sugar, doesn't matter.
She didn't repeat anything, she didn't hesitate, and she didn't deviate. And Maria, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt, and you have 52 seconds on boots, starting now.
These were the words I uttered on...
Clement Freud challenge.
Repetition of these.
She actually said these. And
These boots are made...
and she repeated these, yes. 49 seconds for you, Clement, on boots, starting now.
If I could walk that way, I wouldn't need talcum powder. Was one of my favourite boots jokes of my youth. But also, alligators don't have any hair. Oh, it's just a trade name like mothballs. Is similarly good and...
Paul Merton challenge.
Is it me, or... Is Clement just talking rubbish?
I know it. I must inform you, Paul, because you're a different generation of comedians. These are the jokes that Clement Freud used to tell in his restaurant when he had it at the Royal Court Theatre Club years ago. He's just giving the taglines of a lot of jokes he knows. I think you have a good challenge. 31 seconds. Boots, starting now.
Ooh.
Paul. Clement Freud challenge.
Hesitation.
I know, but you didn't know that. But he wasn't sure he was allowed to get off the leash again, so Paul Merton has the subject. 30 seconds are left. Boots, starting now.
Boots the Chemist, what a wonderful firm. Established, I believe, originally here in Nottingham. And what a place that is indeed, because there's a lot of people who come from the local area because that's why they're here. I mean, they obviously are not a lot of them come from...
I remember a challenge, yes. Yes. 15 seconds. Boots, with you, Derek, starting now.
I get my glasses from Boots because I can't afford, like Nicholas Parsons, to go to a very posh optician, but they give me tremendous value for money. These are national health frames, and they give me a very good prescription, and I do think Boots offer a wonderful service.
Paul Merton challenge.
Repetition of very good.
Yes, you did say very good before. Yes, you did. Sorry.
I didn't say very good before.
What did you say then?
I said wonderful.
I thought you said very good.
I thought you said very good.
Yes.
That's one of the reasons why I challenged.
3 seconds are available for you, Paul, on boots, starting now.
Boots, boots, boots.
Clement Freud's challenge.
I think that's too many boots.
I was doing the song marching up and down again. I didn't get to that bit.
I think if he'd gone for a fourth one, it would have been too many, because that was a song. 1 second on boots with you, Paul, starting now.
One of the great...
Clement Freud is still in the lead. He's 1 point ahead of Derek Nimmo, and then come Paul Merton and Maria McErlane in that order. And Paul, your turn to begin. The subject, Carbuncle. Will you tell us something about Carbuncle in 60 seconds, if you can, starting now?
One of my favourite Sherlock Holmes stories written by the great Sir Arthur Conan Doyle is entitled The Blue Carbuncle. This is a particularly fine mystery. The action, as you know, takes place at 221B Baker Street, and Watson comes in and says, oh, and Holmes...
A Derek Nimmo challenge.
No, there's no accent over the second one.
No, it was an hello, or words to that effect. And that was repetition, Paul. So 42 seconds for you, Derek, on Carbuncle, starting now.
The Prince of Wales said when the proposed extension was first displayed to the National Gallery in London, it looked like a monstrous carbuncle on the face of an old friend. And through his intervention, that design was got rid of, and the very pleasant classical facade of the new building, which is now in place, was erected. It is very splendid indeed, and fine, when I was there the other day...
Clement Freud challenge.
Sounded like a hesitation.
It was a hesitation.
Yes, it was.
No, it couldn't sound like a hesitation because there's no sound in a hesitation. There's a silence in a hesitation.
Well, there's still a sound of somebody going... It's not, you can't smell a hesitation, can you?
Now, you can't smell it, but normally there's a silence.
You can't taste it.
No?
And if you can't hear it, how do you know it's there?
"19 seconds. Carbuncle, Clement, starting now."
Old people tend to die of carbuncles. Anthrax.
Paul Merton challenged.
Hesitation.
Yes.
And possibly false medical knowledge.
I would have given you 2 for deviation as well. I quite agree, Paul. So, but either will do. Carbuncle is the subject. 14 seconds for you, starting now.
If you go to Switzerland, the most popular make of car is called the Buncle.
And Clement Freud challenged.
Not. Deviation.
Deviation. 9 seconds, Clement. Carbuncle, starting now.
In animals, a carbuncle is called anthrax.
Paul challenge.
Hesitation?
Yes, Paul, I agree. 6 seconds, Carbuncle, starting now.
I once developed this most enormously horrible-looking carbuncle on the back of my neck.
Paul Merton was then speaking as the whistle went. Gained that extra point for doing so, and he's equal with Derek Nimmo in second place now, just behind our leader, Clement Freud. And McErlane, it's your turn to begin. The subject is dressing. Will you tell us something about that subject in 60 seconds, if you can, starting now?
Dressing is surely one of the most tedious pastimes. Should I put the blue polka dot dungarees with the pink hat, or the yellow taffeta dress with the purple tights?
Derek Nimmo challenge.
With thee.
With thee, yes, there were 2. That's a tough challenge.
But should I, though, Derek? What do you think?
I think you should.
You do, thank you.
Derek, you have 50 seconds for dressing, starting now.
If you're working in a play, or particularly in a musical, you need a dress. Now, for instance, Nicholas Parsons, our chairman, was recently in a wonderful show in London, and he had to dress in
Paul Merton challenge.
Hesitation.
I know you couldn't get it out, could you? You were so shocked by it.
I was a bit shocked with that.
He was referring to the Rocky Horror Show where I underdressed in fishnet tights and suspender belt.
And that was just going to the theatre.
You know. Paul, you have a correct challenge. The subject's dressing. There are 21 seconds left, starting now.
In my salad days, I no.
Clement Freud challenged. Yes, hesitation, Clement. 18 seconds. Dressing, Clement, starting now.
If you put on your shoes and socks and pants and shirt, tie, collar, and you're a bit angry, it's called cross-dressing. I would like to recommend that to all my listeners, because it's become enormously trendy. Walk down any London street on a Saturday afternoon.
Clement Freud was then speaking as the whistle went, gained an extra point and has increased his lead, and we're moving into the final round. It's fairly close. Clement's only just in the lead, ahead of Paul Merton and Derek Nimmo, who are equal in second place, about 2 or 3 points behind. And then comes McErlane. And Derek, it's your turn to begin. The subject is Bigwig, and can you tell us something about it in just a minute, starting...
This derives from the days when magnates and important people wore a much larger wig than anyone else. Nicholas Parsons wears a fairly small wig, which actually shows how deeply negligible as a person he happens to be. Now, I do know big wigs, in fact. I have as a friend, I think.
Paul Merton challenged.
Hesitation?
Yeah, I'd have given you to whatever you'd said, actually.
Thank you.
42 seconds for you, Paul, on Bigwig, starting now.
Bruce Forsyth has a big wig, which he shares with the three Beverley sisters. They have it on Monday, a Tuesday, a Wednesday, a Thursday, whereas the gentleman I mentioned earlier tends to utilise this toupee on Friday, Saturday, on Sunday. Now, I don't know why.
Derek Nimmo challenge.
Deviation, a toupee isn't a big wig.
Well, if you've established the size of the toupee, then it's a big wig.
Possibly.
And I had established
toupee
it's big
is
enough
something
for 4
like
people.
yours, Nicholas, which you just brush into your remaining hair. Take it off, Nicholas. Come on, take it off. Come on, take it off, Nicholas.
Yolanta, will you please pull my hair for me? Will you please pull my hair? Is it coming away? No.
Get hold of his hair instead.
Oh, I enjoyed that, actually. Thank you very much. We do have some fun in just a minute. Paul Merton, who was challenged? Maria, you challenged.
I'd just like to tell everybody at home that Yolanta is crying now.
I like that challenge, actually, Maria, so you've got the subject, because I don't know what on earth was going on. 24 seconds starting now.
Paul Daniels has quite a big wig, but not as big as Debbie McGee, his wife, whose hair is really quite extraordinarily large, sometimes reaching 25, 30 foot, which you might like, but not a lot. I know I don't. I'm not really talking much sense now, but I'm hoping somebody will stop me soon, because really...
And Derek Nimmo has.
Well, I was just trying to satisfy the lady.
But have you got a challenge? Oh, dear, but not in public, please. What is your challenge?
She said she hoped somebody challenge. I did. I mean,
challenge. You haven't given hesitation, repetition.
Well, repetition.
No. She didn't repeat anything.
Well, you never listen. How do you know?
Anyway, who would buy a grey wig?
Maria, you have 6 seconds still available on Bigwig starting now.
Bigwigs often work for huge corporations.
Paul Merton challenge.
Repetition of huge.
Yes, you did say huge.
Huge hair, yes,
Yes,
of course.
that's right. Paul,
Silly
you've got
talk.
2 seconds to go. Last round, Bigwig starting now.
The largest hairpiece I ever saw covered the island of Lesbos.
So, Paul Merton, speaking as the whistle went, not only gained an extra point, but brought the end of the show and the end of the round together, one at the same time, with a great flourish, and he finished in 2nd place. In 4th place was Maria McErlane, only just behind Derek Nimmo, and he was only just 2 points behind Paul Merton, and he was just 2 points behind Clement Freud. So we say the one with the most points is our winner. That's Clement Freud. It only remains me to say thank you to our 4 talented players of the game, which is Paul Merton, Clement Freud, Maria McErlane and Derek Nimmo. I also must thank Yolanta Zabuki, who has kept the score for the first time and blown her whistle so magnificently. I must thank Ian Messett, of course, who created the game, and also Anne Jobson, our producer, director. And from them and me, Nicholas Parsons, goodbye. Hope you've enjoyed Just a Minute. Tune in next time we play this game. Welcome to Just a Minute. Hello, my name is Nicholas Parsons, and as the Minute Waltz fades away, once more it is my pleasure not only to welcome the audience to the show, but to introduce our 4 exciting players of the game. We have 2 from the older generation who've been with us since our show first began, that is Peter Jones and Derek Nimmo, and we have 2 comedians from the younger generation. One, Tony Hawks, who's played the game a number of times, and Graham Norton, who's only played it once before. Would you please welcome all 4 of them? Beside me sits Yolanta Zabuki, who is going to keep the score and blow a whistle when 60 seconds are up. And as usual, I'm going to ask our 4 panellists to speak, if they can, on the subject I give them, and they will try and do that as usual without hesitation, repetition, or deviation. And some time ago, we were in the lovely town of Alnwick in the beautiful county of Northumberland, and there was such warm, friendly audience. I suggested then that we might come back again. And we're going to play the game and start with Tony Hawks. Tony, Lindisfarne, a local subject, a local place. Give us some local information, 60 seconds starting now.
Lindisfarne, or Holy Island as it is known, is a site of a church and a monastery founded by St Aidan in 635 AD and abandoned soon after when he realised it was rubbish for public transport. Also the name of a group who had hits like Meet Me on the Corner, Lady Eleanor, Run for Home, and tragically Fog on the Tyne, which they recorded with Paul Gascoigne. They only made the one record together because Gazzo put his knee out whilst altering the height of the mic stand and was sent off for dissent shortly afterwards. It is, of course, near Alnwick, that marvellous town where we are this evening, and I was told by the taxi driver on the way here, for tragically, that is how I made my way to this venue, shunning the obvious stop at...
Oh, Peter Jones has challenged.
Hesitation.
Yes, it was hesitation. The audience were disappointed because they wanted to hear more about his trials.
Oh, gosh.
How he got here.
I can't win.
You can. You have a correct challenge, Peter. You get a point for a correct challenge.
Oh, I see.
You take over the subject, and it is Lindisfarne. And there are 13 seconds left, starting now.
I'm told that if I leave the hotel and turn left instead of right, I would eventually come to the castle. I haven't done that because I haven't really had time. Barely enough, actually, to get here.
Derek Nimmo challenge.
Deviation. He's not talking about Lindisfarne. He's talking about traffic problems getting to the castle.
He was deviating from the subject of Lindisfarne. I don't think you'd established it well enough, Peter. And Derek's cleverly got him with 1 second to go on the subject. He gets a point for that. He takes the subject, Lindisfarne, starting...
Eric Bloodaxe was one of the people around.
When Yolanta blows her whistle, it tells us that 60 seconds are up, and whoever is speaking at that moment gains an extra point, and it was Derek Nimmo, so naturally he's in the lead. Peter, would you take the next round? The subject, follies. Will you tell us something about follies in just a minute, starting now?
One of the best follies in the world used to be Ziegfeld's in New York, and I wish I had been to see Will Rogers and Eric Blore and a number of other well-known comedians who appeared there, including Fanny Bryce. Now, there were some...
Graham Norton challenged.
It was a bit hesitation.
It was definite hesitation, Graham, definite.
Right. Was it
you
right?
have a correct challenge, you have a point, you have 42 seconds. Tell us something about follies, starting now.
There can be little more pleasurable than wandering around looking at follies. For instance, a garden shed built in the shape of a toilet brush. Or...
Tony Hawk's challenge.
He wants to get out more.
Tony, lovely challenge, but he wasn't deviating from any of the rules of just a minute. So you get a point because we enjoyed the challenge, but Graham gets a point because he was interrupted. He keeps the subject. 33 seconds, follies, starting now.
One of the most famous follies in all America is a lovely guest bungalow built beside a swimming pool as an homage to the bra of that great heroine of all, Dolly Parton. This sleeps 8 people comfortably. I know because I was there. Barbecues aren't advised, though, because it can be a little dangerous, so you have to have a medical team standing by at all times. Other follies I have visited in my short life include a thatched cottage. Oh!
Graham Norton was then speaking as the whistle went, gained that extra point for doing so, and he's now in the lead at the end of the round. And Graham...
enjoy it while I can.
You have a big following in Annick, Graham. I'd work on that one if I were you. Graham, it's your turn to begin, too. Scandal. Will you tell us something about scandal in just a minute, if you can, starting now?
I love scandal and gossip, aren't you surprised? But some people do claim not to like terrible behind-back type stories, i.e. scandals. You meet these fellows and you think, no wonder you're never invited to a dinner party. You're too dull. Because if you don't talk about scandals, what on earth are you going to talk about?
Tony Hawks is challenged.
I think the subject's scandal, and you said scandals twice.
You did indeed, I'm afraid, Graham, yes.
Oh.
Yes.
Well, like this. I'm moving to Annick. I've more friends here now than I do in the rest of the country.
And Tony Hawks has a correct challenge. He takes it over starting now.
There is no scandal like a royal scandal, and 22.5 million people listen to Princess Diana spill the beans about her marriage. And it is a scandal that only 18 or 19 million people will be watching. Yes.
Nimmo challenge. Million. You repeated million, I'm afraid.
I didn't know.
And 26 seconds for you, Derek, on scandal, starting now.
Yes, I think we all like a bit of scandal. Ross Benson, the Daily Express, Nigel Dempster in the Mail. We like to read of things like...
Tony Hawk's challenge.
Repetition of like.
You like, yes.
We all like a bit of scandal.
And they like him and like Ross Benson.
Gloves off, isn't
The reason I have to sometimes explain to the players this, because they look at me with such disdain as if how I could possibly dare to take the subject away from them. And I have, because it was a correct challenge, Tony. 18 seconds, scandal starting now.
There was a film called Scandal starring John Hurt and Joanne Whalley-Kilmer about the Profumo affair, a Tory minister involved in a sex scandal. Thank goodness those days are behind us now. Anything like that again. Now, the scandal of this day...
So Tony Hawks is speaking as the whistle went, gained an extra point for doing so, and he's taken the lead, one ahead of Graham Norton. Derek Nimmo, your turn to begin. The subject, Buccaneers. Will you tell us something about those characters in just a minute, starting now?
There was a musical written some time ago by Sandy Wilson which starred the late, very lamented Kenneth Williams, called The Buccaneers, all about a newspaper, and he was the editor of it. And gosh, he was extraordinarily, wondrously fun in it. And I do wish they would revive it, but whoever could possibly play that part, that talented former member of this team, actually enacted that at the time. The original Buccaneers came from Hispaniola. Bacan was a kind of dried, spiced meat which they used to eat, and they were Protestant sailors from France, from Germany, and indeed, of course, from England. And they were pirates. But somehow, if you are a buccaneer, it's a rather swashbuckling sort of fellow, and it makes you feel sort of good, just shiver my timbers, lad. I'd like to be one of those chaps out on the Spanish Main, sailing across, hoist the flag, up the mainsail, jolly rod. What's gone wrong with it? Where's it gone?
Pete Jones, your challenge.
Well, he seemed to be auditioning for the Pirate King.
So what is your challenge with the rules of just a minute?
Well, I don't know. I'm just going over what you said.
Amazing you can remember it.
Well, I can't, of course. That's why it's taking so long.
So, no, right, he wasn't actually hesitating even or repeating anything, so 7 seconds still with you on Buccaneers, Derek, starting now.
When the ship sailed into Plymouth, Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth sent an envoy to greet it, and off the ship came the master.
So Derek Nimmo started with Buccaneers and finished with Buccaneers. He was interrupted at one point. He gained points for that and points for speaking as the whistle went, and he's now equal in the lead with Tony Hawks. And your turn, Tony, to begin, and the subject, bonds. Will you tell us something about that in this game starting now?
Until recently, I was dealing heavily in stocks and bonds, until my advisor, Nick Leeson, no longer answered my calls. Sellotape could be argued as being a kind of bond, and interestingly, the Australian word for this item is Durex. And when in Australia, I tried to purchase a contraceptive and was most taken aback by what they gave me in its place. It looked to me like they wanted me to make one myself. Billy Bonds, of course, the ex-Hammers footballer, told me a story once. He said, what's the difference between... no, he didn't, because that's another tale completely I shan't tell you. What he did say was... oh, my God.
Peter, you challenged.
Yes.
Yeah.
He
tell me what
hesitated,
it is. Yes, he came to a juddering halt, actually.
Well,
but,
all right.
Yes,
I didn't
so
want to rub it in.
interpret that as hesitation. Peter, a correct challenge. 19 seconds are available for you to tell us something about bonds, starting now.
Well, bonds are things that people tie each other up with, and they use...
Derek Nimmo challenge.
Hesitation.
No, definitely not. 14 seconds, still with you, Peter. On bonds, starting now.
It's something to do with S&M, and I don't mean Marks and Spencer's. I've only read about it, and I've seen advertisements for ice cream on the television, and I imagine that it may have something to do with that particular dessert. I don't know. I'm very innocent.
Peter Jones is then speaking when the whistle went. It's a very even show this week. They're all three equal in the lead, and only 1 point behind comes Graham Norton. So, anybody's... It's only 1 point behind. He'll soon pick that up when he has a chance. Peter Jones, it's your turn to begin. The subject, a scoop. Will you tell us something about that in just a minute, starting now?
Well, we're back to ice cream again. I don't really see why.
Graham Norton challenge.
That'll be repetition.
Why?
Well, we're back to ice cream.
But he hasn't said it in this round.
No, but conceptually, I thought.
We don't have conception. If we had conceptual challenges and psychic challenges, I think we never get anywhere in this game. It might be a very interesting round to have, but it's... No, I'm sorry, Graham.
Oh, fair enough.
Another point to you, Peter. And you have 56 seconds. A scoop starting now.
I've watched this couple eating this delicacy for many months now, and I wonder why they don't ever have a change. What about good old bread and butter pudding? Or spotted dick, or something like that. They could keep their clothes on and enjoy it just as much. But they don't do that. Or even apple tart. I can go through a Bakewell tart. Now, that's one of my favourites.
Tony Hawk's challenge.
Repetition of tart.
Too many tarts, I'm afraid. 36 seconds for you, Tony, having got another point. A scoop starting now.
A scoop is an exclusive item in the newspapers. A headline like Parsons adjudicates panel competently would be an example of a scoop. Far be it from me to suggest that that might be in any of our publications. I like to make a trip to the seaside where I'm taking my parents, and I have a scoop.
Graham Norton challenge.
A deviation from words. The parents thing.
I said parents instead of parents.
Yes. A deviation from English as we understand it. And, so, Graham, well listened. You have the subject of a scoop starting now.
My mother has a scoop, an ice cream scoop, but culinary whiz and general kitchen goddess that she is, she doesn't use it for that cold thing that comes out of the fridge with sugar in it. No, she prefers to make lovely mashed potato...
So your oohs and ahs when this Graham Norton was 1 point behind the other three at the end of that round. With that extra point he got then, he's now equal with the other three at the end of that round. And Graham, it's your turn to begin. The subject, gluttony. 60 seconds as usual, starting now.
Some people see gluttony as a vice, but I think it's a virtue, because if you don't eat it, it'll just go off. And certainly there's a rule in my house that you don't go to bed until that fridge is empty. Now, gluttony, however, does have its downside. For instance, my body is expanding in strange ways, so that when I...
Tony Hawk's a challenge.
In that case, I don't want to sit next to you anymore.
Tony, we enjoyed the challenge, so did the audience. We give you a bonus point for that. But Graham was interrupted. He gets a point for being interrupted. He keeps the subject. 38 seconds are left on gluttony, starting now.
When I go to a disco and start dancing, often I look like Gloria Hunniford playing volleyball. This is as a direct result of gluttony. Things I like...
Derek Nimmo challenge.
I'd just like to protest. I think it's a very noble suggestion to say that Gloria Hunniford looks like a glutton.
Oh, no, that's not what I'm saying. Oh, now,
You said
please.
that. I'm sorry you said
Gloria's
that.
a gorgeous woman, and I would never say that. No, it's just that gluttony has led me to look like her. No. God designed Gloria in that sort of Hunniford shape. But he designed me in a sort of Norton shape. But due to gluttony, I'm becoming the Hunniford shape. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. 28 seconds. Another incorrect challenge. And you have another point, Graham. 28 seconds on gluttony, starting now.
Gloria Hunniford is, in fact, a glutton for...
Tony Hawk's a challenge.
Repetition of Gloria Hunniford.
Tony, gluttony, and there are 25 seconds starting now.
I was once writing with a friend and we stopped what we were doing and decided to go out and have a break. We bought some cake and some ice cream, took it back to the house and consumed all of it and felt stupidly sick. And this is why you need parents to tell you that you can't finish everything off. One of the hazards of being an adult is that you will go on eating till you explode into shapes mentioned by Graham Norton, but far be it from me to suggest.
Tony Hawks is speaking then of the whistle when gained that extra point, and he's one ahead of Graham Norton and Derek Nimmo. Your turn to begin. The subject, casts. Will you tell us something about that in just a minute, starting now?
I would dearly like to cast a fly into the Caspian Sea and try and capture one of those wonderful sturgeon, preferably a beluga, which doesn't actually have any young for 20 years before it lays the eggs. They can live to over 100 of the things I've just mentioned. What's the matter?
Someone challenged. Tony.
Clumsiness.
I must explain to our listeners that Derek Nimmo was demonstrating his casting of the fly and in the process knocked his bottle of water over, which was beside him on the table, and that's why we had the challenge of clumsiness, and the audience couldn't care less because they saw it all.
You couldn't go fly fishing in the sea.
No, that's I quite agree.
Chance,
so, Tony, 44 seconds now on casts, starting now.
I'm interested in the way that Michael Winner casts his films, because he seems to be going out with the leading ladies shortly afterwards. I was casting my fishing rod the other day, but that's another story. I can't be asked.
Peter Jones challenge.
Is the subject casts?
Yeah, that's right. The subject is casts.
He's not talking about casts. He's talking about casting.
Yes, and he's repeated casting as well, hasn't he?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Well,
I was talking rubbish as well.
I know.
Well, we have to disregard that. Otherwise...
We'll never be able to play just a minute, would we?
No, quite right.
Right, 19 seconds for you, Peter, on casts, starting now.
Dear old Kenneth Williams was invited to play a part in which he had to brown his face. And the producer said, you do realise what you have to do, because this is a part of a half-cast. You understand? And Kenneth said, yes, you mean the part's been promised to someone else.
Peter Jones, speaking as the whistle when gained that extra point and reminded us of our much-loved and departed friend Kenneth Williams, who was so successful on Just a Minute for many years. And your turn, Tony, to begin, and the subject, Old Masters. And you have 60 seconds, starting now.
We had an old master at my school called Mr. Simpson, who took a very keen interest in the boys' extracurricular activities, and he'd invite a select few back to his house to go swimming. And when the authorities discovered that he didn't have a pool, he was sent to prison. And I remember thinking, it's a harsh world we live in, isn't it, when you can be locked up for not having bathing facilities. The Mona Lisa by Leonardo da Vinci is an old master. Her enigmatic smile, famous image throughout the world, inspiring reverence and ridicule. One remembers Dada, the gesture by Marcel.
Derek Nimmo challenge.
Revolution of Da.
Yeah. All right, Derek, you have 25 seconds now to tell us something about Old Master, starting now.
When you look and see what has won the Turner Prize this year, £20,000 for cutting a cow in half. It is absolutely monstrous. That's why one prefers Old Masters, Raphael. Here in this lovely town of Alnwick, you have fine Canalettos up in the castle. They're the sort of paintings that I would like to own, would like to purchase if I could, and I've said
Tony Hawk's challenge.
Yeah, repetition of like to.
Like to own, yes. Tony, you've got another correct challenge, and you've got 4 seconds left on Old Master, starting now.
Why did that poor girl I mentioned in the picture before look so glum? Was it because...
Tony Hawk, speaking again as the whistle went, has increased his lead, and the other three are equal in second place. And Peter Jones, your turn to begin. The subject, superstitions. Will you tell us something about that in this game, starting now?
Well, I'm not superstitious myself, but I do try to observe the niceties when I'm talking to other actors who are notoriously superstitious themselves. They don't like the Scottish play, for instance, to be even mentioned, let alone quoted from, or even if you are talking about...
Never challenged.
No hesitation, really. I didn't want to, really, terribly, but in the end I thought I ought to.
He was thinking about the Scottish play, and he really did. The superstition overwhelmed him, actually. 40 seconds, Derek, on superstition, starting now.
I'm always terribly careful not to walk under ladders. I know it's only just a superstition. It's a very silly one, too, come to think of it. But I find myself compelled to walk out on the road, often in front of traffic coming towards me like cats. Very lucky, like them around, have them all the time. Everywhere I can find one of these feline creatures of a noir.
Peter Jones.
Meditation.
Yes.
Yes. Peter, you have a correct challenge.
Yes.
And the subject is superstitions. There are 15 seconds left, starting now.
Well, I'm rather sorry that they're as long as 15 seconds, because I've already said everything that I have to say about superstitions. There are some that involve throwing salt over the back of your neck or something
Derek
like
challenged
that.
you before.
Well,
there was an urn, I'm afraid, Peter. And Derek's got in with 3 seconds on superstition, starting now.
if I spill salt on the table, I pick a pinch up and throw it over my left shoulder, keeping away the devil.
Well, Derek Nimmo was speaking as the whistle went, getting that extra point. He has moved forward, and surprisingly, because Derek's often out there in front, but he's still equal only in second place. Our leader is still Tony Hawks. And Graham Norton, your turn to begin. The subject, stout. Would you talk on the subject starting now?
Gloria Hunniford is not stout. Everyone to know that and be aware of it. She is a svelte feline-like thing that prowls Radio 2 like a disco goddess. Now, in Ireland, stout is a sort of beer, particularly a sort of dark one.
Derek Nimmo challenge.
Repetition of salt.
Oh, thank you.
So, Derek, another correct challenge, and another point, and another subject. Stout with you, starting now.
I think the Murphys, marketing people, were frightfully clever to get President to come and have a picture taken in front of one of their bottles, Clinton, when he was over there, you remember, a few weeks ago. And he was drinking the foaming, brothy, wonderful liquid, but actually his lips only touched the top, and he didn't sip one little bit. Much to the delight of Guinness people who'd hoped to have a similar snap taken for their own nefarious purposes. Now, stout is something that you get if you are a glutton. And I was very deprived because I was not allowed to talk on gluttony, which I would dearly like to have done. Because being stout, obese, is one of the things which I am rapidly moving towards.
Derek Nimmo speaking as the whistle went, gained that extra point. He's moved forward. He's now only 1 behind our leader, who is still Tony Hawks. And Derek, it's your turn to begin. A number of points leapt forward from 4th to 2nd. What's going to happen now as we approach the end of the show, but not quite? And the subject is my favourite clothes. Will you tell us something about those in just a minute, starting now?
My favourite clothes, I suppose I would start with +2s and some long socks and an old tweed jacket, a pullover perhaps beneath if I'm going out on the moors, and a cloth cap with a couple of fishing flies stuck in it in case I found a river and I had my rod with me. I like particularly elderly clothes. There's something but awfully nice.
Derek Nimmo illustrating how difficult it is to play Just a Minute. Yes, instead of saying repeating particularly, he hesitated and Tony Hawk's got in first. My favourite clothes, Tony, and there are 39 seconds starting now.
My favourite clothes are trousers. Whenever I go to people's houses, I take them off so I can feel the benefit of them when I leave. I also like bell-bottoms and clothes from the 70s, like tie-dye shirts and those great big white ties that people used to wear with penny collars. Also, this was the kind of fashion that we should bring back today, instead of people walking around in black, which they tend to do a lot, I've noticed now. My other favourite clothes are shoes. These are to be worn on the feet, preferably not on the head.
Derek Nimmo challenge.
Well, shoes aren't clothes.
I think that is open to debate, and I think it's the way you interpret the word. So I think I'll give the benefit of the doubt to Tony Hawks, who has the subject, because we're moving into the final whistle. And Tony, there are 6 seconds left. My favourite clothes starting now.
My favourite clothes include my boxer shorts, which I'm wearing at the moment. Obviously, otherwise I wouldn't have any pants on, and that would be a disgraceful way to play.
Well, Tony Hawks' boxer shorts brought Just a Minute to a rousing climax. And and as he was speaking as the whistle went, again, that extra point for doing so increased his lead. And it just remains for me to give you the final score. Graham Norton, who has only played the game once before, and he finished only just in 4th place, 1 point behind Peter Jones, who was only 1 point behind Derek Nimmo, but out in the lead with quite a few points more was Tony Hawk. So we say, here's the winner this week, Tony Hawk. We thank them all for their contributions, which is far more important than the points that they gain. So on behalf of Tony Hawks, Graham Norton, Peter Jones and Derek Nimmo, and also on behalf of Yolanta Zabuki, who's been keeping the score and blowing a whistle for us, and Ian Messiter, who created the game, and our producer Anne Jobson, and myself, and particularly our thanks from all of us to this lovely audience here in the Playhouse Theatre at Alnwick, where we've enjoyed our return visit. And we say thank you to them and thank you to our listeners. We hope you'll all be with us the next time we take to the air to play Just a Minute.
The wonderful Just a Minute there. Long may it continue.
Welcome to Just a Minute. Hello, my name is Nicholas Parsons, and as the minute waltz fades away, once again it's my pleasure to welcome the 4 exciting personalities of this week who are going to play Just a Minute. And we welcome back 3 of our senior players of the game. They've been with the show since it first began, and another regular player who set us alight with all kinds of fascinating different what is often called alternative humour, but they all blend together into one whole. Would you please welcome Paul Merton, Derek Nimmo, Peter Jones and Clement Freud. Beside me sits Elaine Wigley, who's going to keep the score and blow a whistle when the 60 seconds are up. And this particular show is coming from the Pleasance Theatre on the Fringe at the Edinburgh Festival. And before us, we have an exciting, over-animated Fringe audience who are going to explode as we start giving of our best. And I ask our 4 panellists to speak, if they can, on the subject that I give them, and they try and do that without hesitation, repetition, or deviating from the subject on the card. Let us begin the show this week with Paul Merton. The subject is tattoo, and you have 60 seconds as usual, Paul, starting now.
It's rather a strain doing this show, knowing that the audience is likely to explode at any moment. Nevertheless, I regard tattoos as a kind of self-mutilation. There is a habit amongst teenage girls to have "I love Nicholas Parsons" tattooed on various parts of their body because, of course, our esteemed chairman is currently wowing them in the West End with his soft shoe shuffle seen outside Harrods with a little hat to collect coins from the grateful passers-by.
Daily Nimmo challenge.
Yes, I think he's departed from tattoo. He's talking about you busking outside Harrods. So deviation.
Yes, I think we could interpret that as deviation, and also the fact I haven't actually busked outside Harrods. Thought he was
more of a Selfridges man. Yeah.
It's nice to have goals in life, though, isn't it, Nicholas?
I get no quarter from any of them, do I? There we are. I don't know why you laugh so much, but there we are. I thought for once I might have got a nice compliment. He was going to plug the fact that I was in the Rocky Horror Show in London, but he didn't, so there we are. Derek, you had a correct challenge.
What show was that again?
Which part of the title do you represent?
The horror part, of course. Derek, a correct challenge, so you have a point for that. You take over the subject. Tattoo, 30 seconds are left, starting
One
now.
of the highlights, I think, of the Edinburgh Festival, this glorious city in Scotland to which we come every year, with such excitement and enthusiasm, to gaze with absolute astonishment at everything, but in particular, the tattoo. Up on the castle rocks, and the lone piper high on the battlements.
What is your challenge, Clement?
Deviation.
Why?
There's no reason to believe the piper's high.
Clement, the audience's applause endorses the fact that that was an enjoyable challenge for which we give you a bonus point, but as Derek was not deviating from the rules of just a minute, he gets...
He wasn't deviating, but he's obviously in the pay of the Scottish Tourist Board.
Derek, you get a point for being interrupted. You keep the subject. 10 seconds left. Tattoo starting now.
Tattoo is one of the few Polynesian words in the British language. It was brought back by Captain Cook when he came returning from...
Peter Jones challenged.
Hesitation.
No, he didn't hesitate.
He couldn't remember who brought it back.
No, I think he kept going. Peter, well tried. Derek, another point for an incorrect challenge. 3 seconds left. Tattoo starting
Scotland the Brave is the wonderful
Martin challenge.
I just wanted to see if my buzzer was working.
A bonus point to Paul Merton, and Derek gets a point for being interrupted. 2 seconds left. Tattoo starting now.
The Egyptian army took place in the 1995
Whoever is speaking when the whistle goes gains an extra point. And of course it was on this occasion Derek Nimmo, and you won't be surprised to hear that he's in a strong lead at the end of that round. And Derek, it's your turn to begin. The subject, Down Under.
I once went to speak at a debate in New Zealand, and the motion was it's better to be down under than on top. Now, you could take that either sexually, socially, or politically. They, in fact, took it, as I mentioned, to the SEX. What's that?
Paul Merton challenge.
Repetition of took it.
They took it.
Oh, they did?
Yes.
No.
I think you said
you
could take it anyway, but they took it that way. So, Derek, you keep the subject. Another incorrect challenge. 45 seconds. Down under starting now.
Australia and New Zealand are generally considered to be down under.
Repetition of New Zealand.
You had New Zealand.
Oh, I did I?
Yes, you did. So, Paul, you've got in that time and 43 seconds to tell us something about Down Under starting now.
I was once working in Melbourne, Australia, and the mayoress of that particular town, I was having lunch with her. There was some sort of...
Peter Jones challenge.
It's actually a city, Melbourne.
It was a long time ago. They had 4 sheep and a post office when I was there.
You don't look old enough, Paul. You can't get away with it.
Well, I put that down to oil of Ulay.
As long as you weren't wearing that
I drink
sweater,
it by the pint.
Peter Jones, a correct challenge. Down Under's with you, 35 seconds starting now.
One of my really favourite places, and I remember the first Sunday I was there, the theatre manager took me for a trip up the Blue Mountains, and he stopped his car, which was a new one, on the edge of a precipice, which was a wonderful panoramic view. And he said, well, you stay in the car, have a rest, Peter, you must be tired, and I'll just stroll around. And I said, no, I want to get out. And he insisted, but then I did step onto the road outside. He slammed the door of the car, it rolled forward and went over the precipice. Crash.
Right. And Clement, you had a challenge.
2 cars.
There were 2 cars.
Yes.
Much earlier on, you said car and you repeated car.
Yeah.
That would be 2 cars then, yes.
Yeah. But Clement very sportingly waited as you got to the end of the story to see if it was worth it.
It wasn't.
I know, that's why he pressed his buzzer. And he's got in now with 6 seconds to go on Down Under, starting now.
Melbourne and Sydney are probably my favourite cities. Down Under, starting now.
So, Clement Freud was then speaking as the whistle went, gained that extra point for doing so. He's in second place behind Derek Nimmo, who's still in the lead, and then it's Paul Merton.
I want to hear music.
Has somebody got a
think it's another
Walkman
show.
on? Okay.
They won't be able to hear you, Nicholas,
Right.
if they had.
I said earlier on that this particular show is coming from the Pleasance Theatre on the Fringe at Edinburgh, and if in the background you hear some very delicate music, it's not the Minute Waltz as we have as the overture for our show. It is another show on the Pleasance which is taking place. So just know that we're being accompanied while we try and entertain you. And
Just a minute, the musical.
Another bonus point to Paul Merton for that. Right, yes, we'll see if you like it better. You can write in and let us know what your reactions are. Peter Jones, your turn to begin. The subject is Count. Will you tell us something about that in this game starting now?
Count Basie comes to mind, the Count of Monte Cristo, and of course, Count Dracula. Now,
Derek
that's a
Nimmo
part
charge.
I've always rather wanted to play.
I know.
Dracula
There was an before the Count of Monte Cristo. So, Derek, you've got in with 53 seconds. Tell us something about Count starting now.
Count is a French title, the equivalent of an English earl. But the curious thing is that a British count has a countess. But although I say that has a different titular name.
Clement Freud challenge.
It's just saying the Count is a French title. You can't have a British Count having a
I say
countess.
it's equivalent.
It's a British Earl that has a countess.
But
Can't we settle this with a spirited song?
it was a very good cue for a song. Clement, I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt. You have 44 seconds on Count starting now.
One of the best ways of counting is to look at the audience and say there are 1, 2, 3, 4 people in the 5th row, and the 6th and 7th from the left look extraordinarily like the 8th and the 9th in the 14th. Count.
Derek Nimmo challenge.
Hesitation.
There's a definite there, Clement, so that's hesitation. 24 seconds back with you, Count. Derek starting now.
Can you imagine fighting Mike Tyson, receiving a vast blow, and then being counted out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and you could not see anything or hear anything? You'd be almost dead. and
Clement Freud challenge.
2 anythings.
2 anythings. See anything or hear anything? Clement, you're back in on the subject of Count.
Speed into it.
I know. 13 seconds starting now.
One of the most dangerous things when you're boxing is if the referee tries to put some speed into it. Instead of counting 1, 2, 3, 4.
Paul Merton challenge.
I think we've heard a repetition of some of those numbers before.
We had. You did. No, you did. You said
First,
1, 2,
second,
3,
and
4.
first, second,
No,
and
no. It was. It went on to that. You said 1, 2, 3, 4 to begin with, and then you went on to the 2nd, 3rd, 7th, and 8th. I have to listen, and that's my job. And so, thank you.
If you weren't here, Nicholas, I don't know what we'd do. Train a budgerigar, perhaps.
You'd find a good fall guy
You won't
somewhere.
get a bonus point for that one.
Why not? Give him one, I don't mind. 2 seconds. Paul, you've got him with 2 seconds to go on the subject of count, starting now.
1, 2, 3, 4.
So, Paul Merton was speaking as the whistle went, gained the extra point for doing so. He's equal with Clement Freud, who are 2 points together behind Derek Nimmo, and then it's Peter Jones. Clement, the subject is basil. Will you tell us something about that subject in this game, starting now?
Basil is a herb which is green and particularly beloved by the people of Italy. An Italian salad is likely to have a red tomato, white mozzarella cheese, and then the verdancy of basil. So that the flag of the Italianate people is reflected in the food which they have on their plate. Many of you might have been to the Imperial War Museum in Rome, where they have a Second World War tank which belonged to Mussolini.
Nimmo challenge.
War.
You repeated war.
Yes.
So that's... You see, they do this. They look at me. I must explain to the listeners. Look at me as if to bluff me out of the fact. You can't give that against me. I definitely didn't do it. But I have to listen and have confidence in my decisions.
Even if no one else does.
I know. 27 seconds for you, Derek, on Basil, starting now.
Good old Basil Brush. Do you remember that little foxy character that we used to see on television? Derek Foe sitting next to him, and the fellow was under the table with his hand up, manipulating poor old Basil all the time. What a curious job when you
Peter Jones, Chazell.
Repetition of poor old.
Poor old. You had poor old before, Derek. Don't look at me like that, please. 13 seconds for you, Peter. Basil, starting now.
I got fed up with recipes that called for a handful of basil, which is an enormous quantity. So this year, I've actually grown my own, and I've been able to produce about 7 pots of it, and I've given some away.
Peter Jones is speaking as the whistle went. He's in 4th place, but only a point or 2 separates him from Paul Merton. Clement Freud and Derek Nimmo's just in the lead. And Paul, your turn to begin. The subject, breaking a leg. Will you tell us something about breaking a leg? And 60 seconds are available starting now.
Well, it's a very painful experience, and I wouldn't recommend it to anybody. I did break my leg up here in Edinburgh in 1987. It was a rather tragic event. I'd come to the festival to do a one-man show, successfully performed for one night, and then went out and broke my leg. And I had the rave reviews that said, go and see this man. And so people would come to visit me in hospital to see how amazing and amusing I was. They would chuckle at my x-rays. They'd never seen such wit. They would watch me dribble food out the corner of my mouth, barely recognising friends and close family as I mumbled into the terrible dream that I was having at the time. It was a ghastly, dreadful, terrible, ghastly, dreadful, ghastly experience.
Clement Freud, you challenge.
Yes.
Yes, you did. I think we know why. 14 seconds. Breaking a leg starting now.
Technically, breaking a leg is wrong. You break bread and you carve a leg. If it's lamb, beef, mutton or pork, you do so by sharpening the knife and cutting against the grain, which is ever...
Clement Freud speaking as the whistle went, gained that extra point, and he's creeping up on our leader. He's only 1 point behind Derek Nimmo. And Derek, your turn to begin. Derek, the subject is pipes. Will you tell us something about that in this game, starting now?
Well, the fair city of Edinburgh at the moment is positively pipe-ridden. Every time you go round the corner, there's some bedraggled fellow whirling away with his pipes.
Paul Merton challenged.
Hesitation.
Yes, hesitation, yes. Paul, pipes, and you have 52 seconds starting now.
Oh, Danny boy, the pipes are calling. Because, of course, Daniel was a plumber, and he would hear this noise, and realised that the terrible rumbling coming from within the pipes meant they had to be lagged for the winter. Why somebody should bother writing a song about this individual, I've really no idea, but it has been passed from hand to mouth over the years. And we have listened to this great tuneful melody, and I'm sure there's not a person here in the audience who hasn't sung this particular ditty at least once today, as they've walked up the Royal Mile, bemusing tourists as they go. I think that's one of the great tricks of Edinburgh, is to confuse the Americans and tell them all kinds of nonsense. They go along...
Paul Merton took the subject of pipes and with his flair and flamboyance kept going till the whistle went, gained that extra point for doing so, and he's equal in second place with Clement Freud, only 1 point behind our leader, Derek Nimmo. Peter Jones is trailing a little, and it's his turn to begin. And the subject is Burke and Hare, another Edinburgh association there. Will you tell us something about those two characters in this game, starting now?
A very unsavoury couple who used to dig up bodies from the cemetery and then sell them to Dr. Knox, who used to dissect them. And in a way, they made a great contribution to medical science. But they ran out of these people in the cemetery.
Hesitation.
There's a lot of hesitation there, yes.
Cadaver was the word I was trying to think
know.
of.
What was the word, Peter?
Cadaver, or I never know quite how to pronounce it.
You say cadaver, I say cadaver.
You're trying to confuse the Americans again now, you Paul. There you are. 43 seconds. Burke and Hare with you, Derek, starting now.
William Burke and Bill Hare were indeed Irishmen who came to this fair city of Edinburgh and went into this rather curious trade of actually murdering people and taking the bodies and flogging them to Dr. Robert Knox, who was frightfully pleased to have a new subject to dissect. But the people didn't really go along with it. They thought it was taking private enterprise a bit too
Paul
far.
Merton challenge.
Hesitation.
Yes, there was hesitation. Burke and Hare's with you now, Paul. 22 seconds, starting now.
Burke and Hare were, of course, one of the first midnight shows on the Fringe in the early days, and people would go along to see the corpses being dragged out of the ground. There were some jugglers nearby as well, and people painting faces for the children.
Clement Freud challenge.
2 people.
Yes, there were too many people there, Paul. 9 seconds on Burke and Hare with you, Clement, starting now.
In the evenings, Burke and Hare used to sit in Mungo Park, wondering what to do about the Niger. They had an awfully good time discussing.
Clement Freud was then speaking as the whistle went, and he's now in the lead alongside Derek Nimmo, and then just behind Paul Merton and Peter Jones in that order. And, of course, there's a little Edinburgh ditty about Burke and Hare. What was it? Up the close and down the stair, bend the hoose of Burke and Hare. Burke's the butcher, Hare's the thief, and Knox the boy who buys the beef. And Clement, it's your turn to begin. The subject is digs. Will you tell us something about that in this game, starting now?
Digs is short for diggings and means theatrical, usually, accommodation. But in Edinburgh it isn't like that. People who live in this fair city leave Scotland altogether while the festival is on and rent their flats and houses for huge sums of money, which performers who are on the Fringe or in the main theatres...
Paul Merton challenge.
Repetition of Fringe.
Yes, you mentioned the Fringe before. Clement, 37 seconds are available for you to tell us something about digs. Paul, starting now.
Archaeologists are people who go on digs. They're intensely interested in digging up something from the past. Oh, look, there's a ring pull can that's got last Wednesday's date on it. We must take it to the British Museum. I personally can't be bothered too much about what happened in the past. I'm really much more...
Peter Jones has challenged.
Repetition of past.
Yes, you mentioned the past before. Peter, you've got him with 20 seconds to go on the subject of digs, starting now.
Mrs. McNabb, 4 Brome Place, Edinburgh, kept the best digs in this country, or the other country down south. She was one of the...
Clement Freud challenge.
2 countries.
There were 2 countries. 11 seconds. Digs with you, Clement, starting now.
Any person who is a bit short of money could do far worse than go to the Steels at Ettrick Bridge, who put up all sorts of strange people for hardly...
Paul Merton
It's a
challenge.
repetition of people.
Yes, there were too many people. You made it before, Clement, I'm afraid. You've got in, Paul, cleverly, with half a second to go on digs, starting now.
A shovel?
Yes, Paul Merton speaking as the whistle went. Gain that extra point. He's now equal with Clement Freud in the lead. And I agree with you, Peter. Mrs. McNabb did have the best digs in the whole of the country. I stayed with the dear lady. She was over 80. She'd had a vasectomy, and she ran around.
She had a vasectomy?
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
Deviation.
Slightly more than a vasectomy if her name was Mrs. McNabb.
She had these wonderful books of all the stars that signed for her.
I never got to know her that well.
Oh, the best things come out by accident, don't they? Paul, it's your turn to begin. A full house. Will you tell us something about that subject in this game starting now?
Well, this is something you get in bingo. All the sixes, 66, and various calls like...
Clement Freud challenge.
I think that could be a repetition of 6.
All the sixes, 66.
That's what he said. That's not repetition. I'm sorry, Clement.
Well, watch it.
An incorrect challenge, Paul's. Another point to you. You have the subject still. A full house starting now.
All the eights, etc. Bingo is a very popular game, although I really...
Clement Freud challenge.
Repetition of all the.
All the... Clement, it's tough at the top there. You're still equal pegging. A full house is a subject. You have 51 seconds starting now.
If you have a full house in poker, you beat a pair, 2 pairs.
Peter Jones challenge.
It did seem a bit of a hesitation.
There was a hesitation, yes. He was trying to go through between a pair and 2 pairs. There was a definite hesitation. Right, 46 seconds. A full house, Peter, starting now.
It's something that many actors don't experience except at Christmas, when all their relatives visit them. But there are other occasions.
Derek Nimmo challenge. There was a hesitation. There too, Peter, yes.
I speak very slowly.
37 seconds, Derek. A full house starting now.
Well, the reason we have a full house at the Edinburgh Fringe is quite obvious. It's because it's free. We couldn't get anybody to come at all. If we were charging 50p, nobody'd turn up. As it is a full house now, we know that we are without value. That is why they've arrived. Rather than going to see the excellent shows that are here, who would actually pay to witness Nicholas Parson? I would not for one. Although I did go and see him actually doing his one-man show, which is an extraordinary sight. I saw the lovely theatre here in Edinburgh with some chums.
Paul Merton challenge.
Repetition of Edinburgh.
Yes, you mentioned Edinburgh before. 7 seconds. Tell us something about a full house starting now.
I've got in my house at the moment 15 young Arab boys who are there for my own personal amusement.
Why you should cheer his devious thought with those Arab boys, I don't know. But he was speaking as the whistle went, gained an extra point, and he's taken the lead just ahead of Clement Freud, and only just behind is Derek Nimmo and then Peter Jones. And Derek Nimmo, we're moving into the last round. It still could be anybody's contest, and a buttonhole is the subject. You have 60 seconds as usual, starting now.
A buttonhole or nosegay was something which I always used to sport. I used to go many years ago to the Dorchester Hotel, and just inside was a wonderful little flower booth, and it always had a clove-coloured flower that I wanted, a carnation, in fact. Had a glorious smell. It's funny, you know, that those particular plants don't actually have a smell anymore. It's a great show. That's perhaps why I don't wear a buttonhole. The other reason for calling it a buttonhole is that some people used to come along, they used to shove their thumb inside your buttonhole and pull you towards them. That was what was called buttonholing, and they would speak very closely to you about some subject of no particular import or interest, but you couldn't get away from them. So don't be buttonholed by Nicholas Parsons if you see him. He will go for you. I warn you, ladies and gentlemen, don't laugh, please. He is an extrovert. He is a cad as well, of course, but he will go towards you and shove.
Paul Merton challenged.
A repetition of he is a.
He is a, yes. I should think so. Whatever he said, I'd have given it against him, actually. The idea that I'd go and buttonhole this audience, I might have chat them up, especially the more attractive ones, but... and I would chat up the unattractive ones, because, I'm...
Desperate.
You have 15 seconds to tell us something about buttonhole, Paul, starting now.
Derek's quite right. You don't see buttonholes as often as you used to. It seems that the fashion amongst modern tailors is not to incorporate this particular feature into the suits that they make these days. I really don't know why this should be the case.
And nobody could have put a buttonhole into your psychedelic sweater anyway, Paul.
It represents the rings of Uranus.
Paul Merton was speaking then as the whistle went, gained that extra point for doing so, and he increased his position at the end of the round and at the end of the contest. Let me tell you that it was a very even contest. They all contributed a great deal. They all didn't get quite the same number of points, but out in the lead, just 5 ahead of all the rest, was Paul Merton. So, Paul, you have triumphed once again in Edinburgh. Paul Merton. For me to thank our 4 intrepid and outrageous players of the game, Paul Merton, Clement Freud, Peter Jones and Derek Nimmo. Also thank Elaine Wigley for keeping the score for us, and also Ian Messiter for thinking out the game, which we all enjoy playing so much. And above all, thank our producer, Anne Jobson. From them and from our audience here, we do hope you've enjoyed the show. And tune in again next time we take to the air to play Just a Minute. Until then, from all of us here, goodbye!